We is cool. We is cool. Alright. So after that minor false start, here we are, of course, with the real deal. Coming at you with part 4 of Portal Mountains. Portal Mountain, The Quest for Coherence, book development. So we've been discussing, for the last year and a half, a whole bunch of topics related to Portal Mountain, and which have culminated in this would be the 4th meeting of a discussion on a development of a book. Part on which I have committed to write. We are outlining right now. There's been a lot of teamwork, of course. A lot of people help with the development over the years. Portal Mountain we've been running for like 3 years on Telegram, something like that. Like a long time, lots of research and development, and things have come to a point where I figured if we just keep live streaming, doing a development meeting every 2 weeks and keep it consistent, something great will come out of it because we've already done the work. And this is just the part where you start to become consistent in something, in doing something, right?
Yeah, so the idea to put it all into one coherent piece.
Mm-hmm.
Of information, and then move from that to pivot off of.
Right. Yeah. The live stream series that we've been doing was our attempt to express everything we know about Portal Mountain, but also we're learning it as we express it. Yeah. Right.
To the point of where we want to have a coherent explanation that can flow. That doesn't have to be as fragmented as it has been.
And I've noticed my own ability to speak with people in general about these kind of topics has improved greatly over the last year and a half, especially in this discussion and conversation. So these are development meetings. They are casual, of course. We drink our brewskis. We cheers all the time. We're always doing cheerses and stuff. So, but don't mind us. In that regard,
we're going to chew our food in front of you.
Yeah, we eat our burritos, all kinds of stuff going on.
By the way,
running low, noted. Yeah, so it's casual development meetings. The other thing I wanted to note was that we basically have our own vocabulary at this point, our own lexicon, our own glossary, whatever you want to call it. So we will be using words, and we can't capitalize them in speech, but we'll try to make, you'll get it. If it's an important word or topic, we're going to be floating and hovering around different subjects as usual. Mm-hmm. But don't be dismayed or discouraged if you don't understand the way that we're using a word. They're all these words, we've kind of just morphed and bent them a little bit off the official usage to make them towards more useful.
I would not recommend going by strictly dictionary meanings.
It's not going to help. So
it's going to make it a little bit more confusing than
that's
it needs
a great point to get out of the way.
A line that I really like to use for this is don't focus on the denotation, rather the appeal is to the connotation of the word being used. So the denotation is still going to paint the picture, but what we're trying to get at is more metaphorical in nature, rather than scientific.
Denote being a more of a structured definition in which one narrows the reality potential, right?
Yeah, like what we've been talking about.
So denotation is a form of scarcity, and we are requesting that in interpretation of what we're saying, you would shift towards connotation, which is more of the abundance of the pure potential of the meaning of the words that are being used.
Right.
So you can only take that so far. You can't go all the way where everything is meaningless, of course, but just to kind of peel back the veneer of officiality and authority of word, all that kind of stuff. So here we are, part 4. I'd like to go over a quick review of what we've done and where we're at just in this 4-part series, very briefly, very, very, very briefly. But before we do that,
Here's an example like of how we would use a word that seems to be commonly known but virtually useless in common speech, a word like the soul. So from our perspective, what we've done is we've taken that word with its denotation of some kind of self object, if you will, that you can conceive of, and moved it into a more specific utility, where it's this self-reference that appears in narratives. So whatever representation of self that appears in any given narrative that has the quality of lack associated with it, its appearances. The lack, the neglect of that we have been referring to as ZEITGEIST in previous conversations. So it's like our definition is riding on the denotation, the original denotation. However, in the effort of making it something more useful and tangible in our parlance, we've narrowed it down to more of the idea of representation of self with narrative, which is part of our modeling of layers, and then also with the applied quality of its when it appears within moments of interpretation, that it has some kind of a longing, a quality of lack, a quality of something is not right.
Right. So, in other words, in
the neglect that we've been defining through commodification.
In another way of saying, or an attribute of that description, is that we've taken the word and made it into something more practically useful
and experience, like something that you would experience, and you can say this is this quality of my experience is what I can call the soul of it. For example, like give it an actual anchor in the flow of narrative.
Yeah. Well, that's again the hero's journey return.
Whereas the anchor that we normally are used to doesn't actually lead anywhere that we would consider a useful. You can't do much with it.
It's almost like, I believe the soul exists, therefore I'm going to stop investigating everything that I've associated the word soul with.
Right.
I simply believe it exists.
Right. In this case, we're totally bypassing that tendency about belief and simply giving it a specific utility. So
we did discuss a lot of this in the first part. Charlatanism, as well as the faith bootstrap, as we called it, this discussing what a useful faith is.
Yeah, this is where they diverge. Because you did say I believe this, like you use the charlatan side of it as like, now that I believe in the soul, I can stop thinking about like
what it represents, what it maps
to. So you've been
to.
given an abstract description in a dictionary, but how does that actually?
So it's only allowed you to take this whole whatever the concept was pointing at, as far as the body goes, and just eject it up into some castle in the sky. Never touch it again. Never have a looped meaning through the body. Whereas
exactly. Whereas what I'm talking about has more to do with how does a soul experience in the first place, and now we've given a bit of a background to that with a self-reference and narrative
before
with the quality of.
Right. So there's a good example of how we use words, and so this is so far probably one of the weak practice, but a good introduction to development meetings and how we do them. I wanted to start off this meeting after that, opening it perfectly. Good job. We did nice work there with a recap of the last 4 meetings. And I don't want to discuss the content of them too much, but just bring up the words that came up, the topics, the subjects.
The zeitgeist being very important.
That's one of them.
Lift. Death circle.
Yeah. So again, that comes later.
Animism needs to come up because.
But hold on.
The death circle can only be explained through that framework. Really.
We need to focus here, Zhenya. Now eat your burrito. If you have a mouthful of burrito, then I can go on and say what we've done in the last 3 meetings. Because that's what we need to get over that before we can proceed.
Well played. I accept.
Get your mouth busy with something useful.
That's what she said. I mean,
Yeah. That was a setup for sure. Yeah, so part one, the first meeting that we did, we really focused quite a bit on the whole charlatanism discussion and about faith, because this triggers people, and this is one of the first things. Our appearance is as a charlatan, right? And we admit that, and that's on anybody who has something to say or share has that appearance. And it's not necessarily a bad thing to have the appearance. It's what do you do later on with it. So we did discuss what I had tried to outline for this book that we're writing.
It's not what you do with it; it's the acknowledgement of it. Really, it's the acknowledgement of that this is that too. Right? There's no sound bite that is perfect, if you will. That's not going to be that's not going to be interpreted correctly at 100%.
So this is one of the main themes of the first part that we went over, the ZEITGEIST as well, and like we just talked about the soul, so we've already basically introduced that, and we were just going over a table of contents sort of outline that I had created initially to launch this meeting series about the book. So we managed to get into the sections next after that about coherence itself. This is the section 2 of the book. First one being the basic preliminary bootstrap. Section 2 is titled so far the polymorphic machine. This is kind of just a more generic description of life itself, of the model that we use to model life, the holonic model. What does it look like when you use such a model? And so that's section 2, polymorphic machine, starting with coherence itself. What is coherence? Coherence as a resonance or isomorphism between different things. Just as a concept, just to introduce this, the quest for coherence is the title.
I like this
title
idea
of the book.
Symphony. If you so for that, the metaphor is like a symphony. How does if you're playing your own thing, you can only be coherent with from note to note to note to note to note. But in an orchestra,
in the history
like
of your own note playing.
Yeah, but that doesn't speak to the coherence that it has with the entire orchestra. If you imagine everybody doing that,
or even a band
in an orchestra, well, orchestra gives the more grander sort of like lots
feel
and
to
lots.
it. Sure, fine.
Right,
it's a better metaphor for that reason, the grandeur of life, if you will. It's like an orchestra, pardon me.
A band would work, but it's just a very limited.
So yeah, so that's an example of isomorphism and what it is. So that's we did get into that in part 1, but this is section 2 of the book already. From coherence, we went to the dream and the moment, which is bringing into view, like kind of bringing the reader a model that they can already start utilizing. In other words, we're invoking the self-reference as soon as possible with the discussion on the dream and the moment. And this also has to come with a warning that you shouldn't do that unless you're kind of like, mentally, physically stable and have support around you, etc. Like this is some, you could call it heavy. The heavy material is the baggage that we hold because due to civilization and all this, and this, even though gaining a model and experience with this stuff can seem very chaotic and evoking of chaos and destruction, creative destruction, if you will. It can be very traumatic, etc. This kind of disclaimer has to be there. A warning must be
The warning
present.
is more like it has to be bite-sized for the circumstance in which you find yourself. Because the ask of our ask can never be one that's beyond the capacity of the reader himself or themselves. Simply because the idea is not to actually gain something from the reader.
I still forgot to post.
Right, like our ultimate goal in this is not to gain anything from the reader. Right, so we're not asking for the kind of activity that is not fitting for oneself. That's the caveat, right? Like, we can talk about this great idea of ultimately of the guild and everything like that, but at the end of the day,
we're starting with that which should fit everybody. Should, in theory, sort of everybody should be able to
but
relate.
at the end of the day here, we can't. We can't say how do you what was it that I was thinking here? We can't say that this isn't for them. Like, it's not for us. Our part of it is we're doing our part right now. Right? Like, so the ask isn't right. I don't. This is the problem with every time you tell people you should do X.
Back to the charlatanism discussion.
It's already a catastrophic failure. Nobody's gonna do what they should, based on what is said that it should be done. Right? Like, what should be done is ultimately something that comes from within oneself. No matter how much we want to twist out that reality that it comes from within ourselves, it still lingers. And so all I'm saying is that we can't proclaim that anything should be done that that the reader should do. What we can say is that should this all make sense, it would make sense to do. Right? Like, it's kind of like that. It's
kind of weird.
The caveat is that there's no ask of go forth and do X, Y, Z.
If only everybody would do X, then that would fix all the problems. There's no sound bites like that. Possible.
We understand that our sound bite sounds exactly like it.
So,
but we're making sure that
again,
you
so this is the
that.
charlatanism stuff. We talked about it. I'm only on part 1 right now. So, just to keep going, we went through in part 1. This is section 2, the polymorphic machine, the dream, the moment, and then I just wanted to give that warning that this stuff can't be studied lightly. And then from there, we discussed whether or not the cognitive alignment window should be, to what extent it should be introduced, because that's already part of the dream and the moment. But do we introduce the neural OS layers? And I think we decided kind of probably not at that point.
Maybe only few, depending on the ones that we need.
And maybe only just mythologically, like to just say, look at this archetype stack. How beautiful is that? Wow. And so we decided, that's probably shelved, and then we got into the animism stuff, complex adaptive systems, grammatical capacities.
That whole framework is necessary to really understand the essence of resonance and why it's the what do you call it? The thing to really, really pay attention to, and what. And anything like in sorcery, the spectacle terms, that's what you sorcerer with, if you will. That because the shape of the wake, is completely shaped by how it's resonating.
No, I get you. It is sorcery of the spectacle, the mechanics of it, the archetype behind that.
But on top of that, the whole scarcity mechanism of the market itself relies heavily on that to be there without knowing how it works.
Right. And this is something that I wanted to bring up later, probably, but just this idea. It's so hard to tease apart what is good and bad. Like, there's no good and bad that we're trying to identify here. But
that's an ethical discussion, which automatically places it into the spectrum.
Yeah. So, like, the idea that this polymorphic machine never went anywhere, but yet here we are using the market machine, which is like kind of like a sharded off ramp on that highway.
Like it works because of it, but it works also in spite of it.
It's the market machine. So if the polymorphic machine is like a a big like 16-lane highway. The market machine is a an off ramp to a collector lane, which continually tries collecting off and away from the highway itself, from the polymorphic machine.
And in doing so siphons the ongoings, if you will.
Collectors too. That's an interesting coincidence. So
Damn.
Good metaphors.
You're back.
All right. And with that brief intro, we'll carry on with more brief intro in just a moment. Very nice, and we are back. So where were we? Just still on part 1, going through. No, we're not quite there yet. Oh, there we are. There we is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're behind it, so it's good.
I got carried away in the smoke.
I thought it was in your face when
By looking at that.
At the screen. It looked like it was in your face, but
It's so thick.
But it wasn't.
It's pushing me
It
away.
wasn't. I was not that asshole.
Yep, indeed.
I think it's just being
So-
drawn to the window. I'll open the other one. It might actually air out better.
Sure. So the discussion about the neural operating system layers as being useful, that did come up in the first. That was a big point of the first meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
There's just a few points about what we're talking about that require those mechanisms to be used to illuminate how, right? Like it's one thing.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say this is what's happening, but we're also going to need to try to show this is the reason why
Yeah.
we're saying what we're
and
saying.
even though I want to keep this a simple introductory book, I still want to contain within it the seeds of everything that we'll need later on.
Yeah,
I want it all to be the
I believe
whole
the
picture.
trick here will be a decision on the choice of words of whether we will put something in the text itself, or say to understand this concept better, it's discussed at this point, because some of the writing is not going to be linear, regardless of how much we want it to be.
Yeah, right. Especially with the idea of having further books later on, it's supposed to kind of fractally expand in complexity.
So I think that the discussion could be an appendix even, or some shit like that.
A lot of things, yeah, sure. Just almost if it doesn't fit into the linear
flow,
narrative,
yeah.
the flow of the book, then yes, add it on. And that's also why I was thinking.
So yeah,
I wanted some introductory essays, which kind of do the opposite or the same thing on the intro lead-in. Things
Yeah.
that just don't fit to the flow of the book itself proper can be introduced in say 4 essays at the very start of the book, right? Like just quick reads to give like different people potentially a different flavor of what they're in for. Yep. So that was pretty much it for part 1 of the first meeting that we did. We got into a lot of detail in the front end and very briefly ended with animism, complex adaptive systems, at which point we said probably all that anybody's going to be able to get from this as an intro is this evocation of the strange loop.
well, this is the same context really, because the
Invocation, rather.
because the neural operating system layers rely on the complex adaptive system description, because this is how the layering in the neural operating system is actually modeled as well. That's
Sorry,
where
I get.
complex adaptive systems, grammatical capacities talk about how
Yeah.
layers emerge from layers.
Right. Yeah.
And this is one such step.
So that's what you need to understand what's meant by strange loops, because they depend on a holonic modeling in which that's the way you could say reality works as a soup in which things can just interact whatever way they damn well
The strange
please.
loop could be described through the grammatical capacity stacks and the fiat resonance wakes that work through protocols and all of that jazz.
Right.
And then how do I start this sentence? Fuck.
How to describe strange loops using...
Yes. So part of that description, sorry about that, part of that description is download and upload, which is reification. And it's in the download and the upload and in the parallel fiat.
So part 2, this is what part 2 is all about, basically.
In the parallel fiat, we can understand how a loop can be formed going up, down through the layers, resonating through the stacks in many, many different ways.
And so it's critical to have a model of what this is and what it's doing in order to understand the polymorphic machine, and also then to understand more deeply what's happening when we have a market machine arising.
Right. which is the scarcity machine.
We
on
need this
top of
model
that.
in order for the book to tell you what we're talking about next.
Exactly,
It has
yeah.
to be there.
So with regards to animism, we can piggyback off of what we described in that sort of so the first time around we talk about complex adaptive systems and whatnot, we can discuss animism, but the second discussion could start illuminate the neural OS more to close the gap between narrative and its effect on the moment.
Like a second book, you mean, or?
No, we need to because we're going to get into dream and moment.
Mm-hmm.
The neural OS is going to bridge that gap as to how narrative slots back into the moment, because the mimetic part of the neural OS system is where the moment is sitting, and the spectacle with the APS is where the dream part
Right.
is sitting.
Yep.
So that those two things map, and then the above the horizon you get the whole other. I'm thinking of a big diagram right now in my head. So that side of it where the narrative compresses into the hyper narrative, compresses into the meta narrative, which is
Right.
obfuscated.
The chunking process.
Right. So all of that sits above the horizon in the narrative part.
The chunking of reality,
Mhm.
if you will.
So all that seems to be accessible to us until it reappears as memes in the moment again. And so this is the connection of this. So this is the working strange loop between dream and moment, and this is the and the animism part and the complex adaptive system part explains how the strange loop even materializes in the first place. So the mechanism and the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's how that
Good.
it can slot in that way. So two discussions of complex adaptive systems would probably be happening in this regard. A third one would the complex adaptive system is probably going to be the thematic part of the whole exposition, because the third part then layers on top of the previous two, talking about the market machine and how and that's this latter part of the narrative and how it fucks up
Mm-hmm.
in representation, stops resonating properly. Because that's what goes off rails, the narrative. When the
Right.
narrative is dysmorphic,
So wait, the three things you were talking about, one you were thinking about the big picture and the chunking of reality. And what were we like, complex
so
adaptive
this is leading
systems,
into- so this is all-
animism.
so this is all leading into here, animism.
Yeah. So what was your order that you thought made sense to...
Same order. What I'm just saying is that...
Okay, but tell me the order, because
So the first time...
what are the elements and in what order? So we have three elements, titled what?
So animism...
Animism. Does that come first?
Animism, big diagram is the second thing I had in my head.
Okay.
With the neural OS.
Neural OS.
Those are like connected
Yeah.
together. And then and then bleeding off from that, the market machine.
Yeah.
So basically, what we're doing there is like we're bringing up the underlying model of the complex adaptive system and the grammatical capacity stacking to weigh in on A, the worldview itself, B, the mechanics of the experiential mechanics of dream and moment,
Mm-hmm.
and C, the hijacking of these mechanics by the dream,
Right.
by making it dysmorphic to what moment is, essentially. Removing that link.
Market machine, in other words.
Removing that link by disconnecting the view of animism from the system. Like, it kills this.
Right.
And creates an ontology instead. So if we thematically show that this underlies it and the end result kills the view of it, what we're then saying
Right.
that there is a disruption in the original description of download and upload. The reification is off. The loop is disconnected. Death circle.
Yes. So that's the mechanism which we need to get into, which I want to get into, and which, before we do so, we need to discuss complex adaptive systems in general.
Yes.
And then take that turn onto part C, like as you were saying, to the hijacking of that. So we establish first what system is being hijacked, because you would need to know. If you ask, how did my computer get hacked? Well, in order for me to tell you that, I have to tell you what a computer is. Right? Like, if you want to actually know.
And yeah, you'd have to understand how they work in order to understand what went wrong.
How did your computer get hacked? Right. So that's the turn towards market machine.
The fact that people say hacked is already... Ugh. It's crack! Crack, damn it!
Depends on what you're doing.
Hacking means hacking shit together. You do it in your garage. You hack away at something.
That's part of it, though. Often.
Oh
Well,
yeah, like you can be hacking as you're cracking, but cracking is cracking something open.
Okay, I get you. I may be on board. I'll think about it.
That's the origin.
So I want to get into this more later, but before we do that, I just wanted
Such
to...
a nerd thing to do.
I wanted to continue. What are we at right now? 38 minutes already, and we've had our first intro, which was great, 15 minutes. And then we got into, like what is a dev meeting and all that, or glossary, lexicon. This recap, all we're doing is recapping so far the last 3 parts before we can even get into the mainstream of this video.
Yeah.
So I want to do that before the 1 hour mark. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Let's have this all.
I only interrupted because I saw a thematic component to what.
But
because of the recap,
it's totally granted.
I saw a theme.
Yeah, the recapping actually helped us to proceed in more development.
So yeah, that's
so we
all
don't want to
was.
just forget all the thoughts that we're having. This
Yeah.
is the point of recording it and having a discussion, and constantly off-roading,
All right.
whatever you call it.
So now that
derailing.
So now that we're back on the rails, we're going through. Where's the?
So part 2 is what we're.
Because we're.
Oh wait, we're not there yet. Let me get into that.
Okay.
What I wanted to say is, part 2 is basically this polymorphic machine, grammatical capacities, and all this stuff. And what we just discussed now is basically the content of what we did in that second meeting. It was a nice full meeting, beautiful. The part 3 is where we only had, because of a holiday and things got messed up on Sunday, an hour and a half discussion, and this was 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we carried on where we left off with the animism discussion in that general topic, but we really focused on artificial scarcity. So this is part 3. This is the last dev meeting, and which was a great topic because this is something that I think anybody can understand and appreciate the difference between scarcity and abundance, and what needs to be understood here to understand the system is that this artificial scarcity is what underpins everything that we talk about. The soul, the ZEITGEIST, and all, it's underpinned by artificial scarcity, produced by this lack of correct thinking, or whatever you want to call it.
Lack of proper reification, as we are terming it.
To lose the self-reference, the strange loop through the body, and all this. That's again something you can have a symbol for it, but it's hard to put into a small set of words.
It's a disconnect between what's being pushed down through the layers of the model that we're discussing, and what comes back up through those layers. There's a lack of language to connect the two in such a way that is beneficial for both sides of this coin.
So I drew a diagram quite a long time ago, it seems, about this idea of a neural network, your brain, meat sitting inside of bones, having a virtual representational image of that which is outside of the bone skull structure, which reflect each other. There's an isomorphism, there's a fundamental isomorphism. And this is invoking the self-reference at its primary kind of core, and I think this is what we need to drill down to with this artificial scarcity and all that. Is artificial scarcity is created by and is said, a lack of childlike behavior, not to be like a little brat, but that the way that you see and interact with the world is that it's alive, and with the respect that objects you seem like one thing but they're not.
I have a descriptor here. It's a scarcity of concepts. There's an artificial scarcity
we brought this up
being applied
once maybe
to
before.
to what you're allowed to conceptualize, or how you're allowed to conceptualize even.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that there
exactly.
that's what you're. I think that's
Yes.
what you're touching on with this rhetoric, because
The scarcity of concepts.
Because artificial scarcity is normally understood as a lack of market presence for a specific item that is necessary in a specific place.
So it was a really great meeting, honestly. Even though the topic was so focused, like we never dithered or went here or there. It was just like we just railed right on that artificial scarcity.
I'll give a very home-hidden example of conceptual artificial scarcity, is that the inability to speak on a subject without specific credentials that signify that you're allowed to speak on said subject.
That's an example.
Yeah, so the fact that I'm not necessarily a psychologist, that means that my experiential opinion and whatever
right.
or
economist.
anecdotal opinion of what I experienced and how I would like to describe it.
What do you know about the economy?
Nullified.
You're not an economist
because it doesn't sit in a book somewhere.
You don't have a framed certificate on the wall behind you.
Right. So because I don't have that framed, I can't speak to any of the presumptions made in the field.
What we're saying here is that this idea, concept or whatever of artificial scarcity is an archetype seen everywhere, reflected everywhere in the system, as you would want to call it.
Conceptually,
This is always happening.
The most concrete way is by using currency to determine what somebody can and cannot have.
Right. And I've tried to be able to explain that.
Regardless of need, by the way.
On many occasions, even with people, because I understand that. And people understand it too. Like, I would say the question, like what happens if a whole region of people just become poor? So arbitrarily, your bank account is low for whatever reason. There's, the government says, we must be
Ukraine.
Anything can happen.
That's what happened in Ukraine.
That's an example of
overnight.
what happens when, and Russia too with the sanctions, like things just disappearing.
Yeah.
Their banking sector disappearing off of them.
I was more speaking to the fact that as I'm reading people's responses, the people on their responses, what they said is that I've worked so hard for everything I have, and now everything is gone in like an instant.
Yeah.
Like I've read many.
Well, exactly. That's the insane shit.
That's the personal level. Like I have no political opinions because.
So yes, it's this is a great example of. So what does an activist, a critical activist, do when they know that this kind of shit hitting the fan is going to fundamentally alter life? And how do you relate to people from that point? From the point of where all you have is each other.
Sorry?
All you have is each other and an empty bank account. The bank says you can't participate in the economy. Why would you have a whole population of people who have each other communicating? And there's so much work to do. This is the thing. There is a massive excess of demand. Why is there not supply? Supply is available. There is an excess amount of supply.
But the currency isn't.
So you have so much demand and so much supply,
and
no
no
economy. So this is the question: how can that even be possible or right? That there is, and even in normal times, let's call it here in Canada, where the economy still works.
poverty in Canada seems ridiculous.
Right.
It's real, but it seems like any
It's hard to-
deeper
Yeah.
like thinking on the subject is like it should never.
You're not
even-
going to find people who are going to even entertain the thought of, well, what if the market doesn't exist somehow? Will not entertain it. So yeah, that kind of But when I'm talking about critical activists, I mean people who have been activated in a certain way to understand and feel that and accept that responsibility, I guess, for the fact that we need to pay attention to the loop, to the strange loop, to the body, to all these things. Otherwise, they just go to chaos. That's what it is. If you pay attention and model it isomorphically, then you become a harmonious part of that symphony.
And that becomes, again, the very, very, very much description of the neglect that comes up as the quality that I alluded to first in the introduction about the soul. That is the specific, very specific quality that was discussed there. That neglect, that inability to reach back down into the whole.
Yeah, that's really great. So this whole discussion on artificial scarcity is a problem that anybody can understand. It's almost synonymous with the zeitgeist. I think it's so deep, right?
It is the zeitgeist. It's just a different description of the same.
Different description, but I mean, it's so archetypal. It's so fundamentally archetypal, right? This what the mind is doing in a machine-like way.
Zeitgeist is the reference to the collective quality. So zeitgeist is the knowledge that inside internal neglect called soul.
But I mean, what the soul feels, what the soul is
globally,
feeling is that
is the
that
realization
scarcity.
but I'm saying zeitgeist specifically refers to the realization that it's a global phenomenon.
Right.
That there
right.
is
and I get that.
it's not just you, that everybody.
I'm always kind of loose with
see.
words. I should have just talked about the soul and the feelings of lack.
Artificial scarcity is the consequence of improper reification in the stacking of the complex.
Right. It's a
adaptive
consequence
system.
of the problem.
Right.
Like this is
So
it's just one. It's one. This is a model that seems to have a lot of explaining power.
But also, this is that the mechanics of this is the qualities of that. This is the number part. This is the word part. This is the reification is the isomorphism between them. Because they're isomorphic that way, they're metaphor. They're the same thing in different ways. Explaining the same thing in a different way for a different reason. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're on the one. We had a number and word division here. Mechanism and meaning. And so the constraints of the model is that these have to be isomorphic, and this is the isomorphism we're looking at. Artificial scarcity, zeitgeist.
Right. Yeah. And kind of the point of what I mean there is that this is a hook that a lot of people can understand. People who are already activated to the point where they are trying to be aware and pay attention to everything they can. Regarding I don't want to sound or get off into topics that don't need to be that specific, but like the idea of a deep state existing, of there being something other than what politicians say to your face, as if there's more to it behind that, and they're kind of translating a translation layer, right?
In particular, there's a club that nobody talks about.
Yeah, this idea. So people who've been kind of woken up to that, let's say awakened to that understand, I think, this as a, okay, you should read Portal Mountain, The Quest for Coherence, because artificial scarcity is something that we impose on ourselves. And this is what, this kind of narrowing of reality in endless death circles, the creation of death circles, the collector lane, just going off. Let's say once you've reached a 90-degree tangent, like, you just blow up, you explode, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the collector's lanes keep trying to pull you off to the side, and the one that's perpendicular is hitting the brick wall.
T-bone.
Yep. So yeah,
T-boning reality.
Damn. So that's the first 3 parts there. Basically, we've really kind of brought anybody up to speed with a lot of the main kind of concepts or important pieces that came up over the last 3 parts. Today, part 4, and we're at 52 minutes in. Doing good for time. Look at that, 8 minutes early.
Even with me talking.
Yep. No, that's a good structure. I like the idea of recapping, kind of like big picture, like just go from the whole big picture. That way anybody can start at any video, any live stream dev meeting, and the first hour is going to be keep getting people up to speed. It might be a good format. We might try it next time. So part 4 today, what we wanted to do was, okay, we already have artificial scarcity continued and the death circle. So that's what we've been doing that pretty much. This is a continuation off of last couple weeks ago dev meeting. So what I had here is under notes, commodification discussion, and this is where I wanted to go with this, was like more specifics of the market machine and how it happens through chronology. So like the idea of having a walled city and what it means to externalize and commodify and kind of speak over that ontological matrix using a market machine. And kind of just what that looks like, because I want to paint the picture very generally, briefly, of chronology as a stacking of externalizations, creating platforms of going from more primitive, quote-unquote, to more advanced societies as you add platforms. And these plateaus or platforms based on a kind of a pseudo-historical understanding based on this holonic organizational model.
So in this
Right.
case we have
archetype model guild holon.
In this case we have another situation in which you have a mechanism and outcome. So commodification is the is the mechanical stuff that happens in the complex adaptive system that removes abundance. It's the mechanism that removes abundance.
Now, is that, we need to tease that apart because, and this gets to that point that I made in the very beginning, like, it's hard to say where does the polymorphic machine diverge from the market machine, and it's almost like they're the same because whatever the market machine builds, the polymorphic machine likes it and that's part of it.
It's when the numbers system is introduced into the layer of representation. So as soon as you introduce a number system into the representative layer, the social layer, that
right.
you start to be able to remove.
But that happens no matter what, and so this is the problem of trying to say, oh, this is good, this is bad.
It happens when you don't have a narrative to capture this happening,
right,
and give you a way out.
Exactly, and that's a weird, strange thing.
Because that narrative has to happen artificially.
Because I'm thinking about, say, one being in proximity to a river, and being thirsty. So your body is giving a demand to which your mind is like, okay, I know that demand. I can supply one drink. That means I have to take myself to the river, grab my cup and scoop some water, and drink it. Right? And that could just be a normal, natural thing. But the fact is that you've taken from the meaning of word down into number in your mind, like it's gone through this calculation, right? Where okay, I'm suffering, feeling pain. Now I know I need to satisfy a condition.
The act, the thought, the environment, and all of those things, at that moment in time, are one and the same thing. Context.
Mm-hmm.
You're thirsty. There's water. There's rivers. The rivers are drank from. Like all of that is just one narrative, right? One context.
And so
reflections of each other.
You're pointing to currency as being like whenever there's a numerical accounting inserted. So in an accounting layer, that's the defining feature of the market.
You no longer have access to the river. You have to have access to an arbitrary piece of paper that is handed to you to symbolize that you have access to the river.
Or you ask teacher, may I go to the drink of the water? You raise your hand first. And then they like acknowledge you, you give the command. They give the command, yes you may. You've received the command.
That too. But the point is that there's no river. There's no thirst. There's just transactions through a third-party abstract system, which exists only in the numerical sphere. Disconnected from everything else because numbers can represent anything.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to get into as well, like the idea of central banking and how long currency, like an arbitrary kind of money token, has always been a part of a walled city, right? I don't think you would have too many walled cities without some...
Grain, storable, sortable, transportable.
Countable. By volume.
It begins with grain as currency.
Right.
So, walled cities were built
and barter trade.
Walled cities were built around crop production. So yeah, there's no walled cities without currency. Currency came first.
Right. And it doesn't need to be a piece of gold or silver.
And the mathematics that brought with it allowed for geometries and on all the different techniques for building the walled city. It wasn't without the math, you wouldn't be able to do it either. So, crop production leads to counting. That counting opens up a whole world of representations and disconnected from reality. So now you have triangles and squares and circles.
I'm thinking ahead a little bit towards the having an internalized economy or a guild economy or whatever. Not the guild, but so I'm thinking of specialization in which you can at least trade your services and goods that you make. So anybody within the walled city has to be justified in their existence by having a tradable kind of asset, whether it's their skill or whether they produce something.
Or else you're a bum.
So anybody who's not a farmer doesn't need to worry about having a garden. They only need to have a tradable service that they can acquire the kind of more high value items, rare items, would come to be the currency of choice.
So you see, there's this jump off from isomorphic qualitative existence to numerical calculated quantitative.
Right. So we're past the walled city as the archetype, and we're into the economy already as the model. I believe we spoke about that in a reverse way, but the idea is you're moving to another layer in this Hellenic model, and this is how we construct pseudo history. And so
It's like introducing an acid into something and it just dissolves it into its component parts. That's what numerical systems do to the isomorphic
Mm-hmm.
myth.
Right, and that's artificial scarcity. Again, you're removing all the things that are not.
And it comes up in stuff like ego stacks, in which taper off at the top. There's far less people at the top than there are at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is. I want to go into the book at around this area at this point, into chronology, just as an introduction, and to how this market machine gets utilized. What does the market machine through time look like? First, it's a walled city. Then it's this kind of skilled trades emergence of a model of city dynamics or whatever, and then you've got another emergence of, like, I think management, whatever it was next.
Yep.
Certification and all that. And
Yeah, so not only did you have to grow up and be skilled, you now had to be stamped on by another body to be allowed to participate in the grand scheme of trades. So that's another layer of that.
Yeah, I find it so interesting, fascinating, to analyze, dissect pseudo history like that.
So this is when everything standardizes, and nation states consolidate into empires.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got those.
So much discussion on this. I'd like to understand better.
And then those very same certification bodies supplant the overarching mechanism that used to sustain them, because they now become the certifiers of who can sustain them, right? So this is when you got the nation state run by business.
Mm. Yep, and that the potential for the singularity of world orders and organization, as they say, yes.
Mm-hmm. So branded realities are consolidated into tunnels.
So with that, let's take a quick break, if you don't mind, sir.
Oh, I'm high.
Okay.
I will destroy you.
All the better. All the better. Good.
Just gonna have to repeat it all.
Good. Well, it was for, our own, maybe our own purposes. So we were just talking about, I guess, how to move towards the last part of this book, as planned, the guild organizational dynamics regarding self, social, and then Portal Mountain franchise, if you will, like modeling. So how to move from that, and what we were just talking about, what we need is this discussion of market machine, how it works, how commodification works specifically, and maybe some minor discussion about supply and demand and supply, and of course this little narrative we've gone through about the walled city and having an economy kind of based on trades, a trade economy, whatever, trade economy.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So how to move the book through that kind of narrative, and so I think we were going to talk about commodification process a little bit.
Well, commodification is necessary to understand where scarcity and how where scarcity comes from, what makes it artificial.
Right.
So
Because the idea, so the idea of trade happens between enemies, but there's also, like, within a tribe, everybody kind of puts in what they do, and the tribe emergent, so to speak, does need the things that are being supplied. Right?
Right, but it's not like you have one job in a tribe that you are
Right.
only going to ever
Bound
be
to.
specialized in. No, everybody knows the basic trades of everybody else,
Right.
and as context arises, right, different individuals create the supply for
Is
the
that a lot
same
to
demands.
ask? Doesn't that only work in a simple setting, simple environment?
Well, this is what Agile Economics is for. To juxtapose the same idea onto a much broader and commodified, already commodified plateau.
Mm-hmm.
So the reintroduction of the exact same thing after having gone through the complete destruction of this exact same thing
Right.
to begin with.
And that's another narrative, which kind of highlights why it's often so difficult to tease out a lot of these concepts. Because what people would react to as bad is not so far from good, because in the sense that, right, that's making
One of the
kind of
first
useless statements.
One of the first hurdles is to say that animism is actually the correct way when you have this whole
Is good. Animism is good.
when you have but when you have this whole opposing narrative that says religion is bad, the last incarnation of it is this monotheism, before which there was this polytheism, before which there was this whole animism thing to begin with, and obviously we've progressed so far past through all these stages as to say that this is the correct one after the fact.
Right.
That sounds like insanity.
Yep.
So there is that, and it also probably reeks of the notion that the ask here is to return to the non-existent, noble, savage sort of state of the human being, which, again, there's a reason that I say it doesn't exist. It was not a historical invention. It was quite a recent one used to juxtapose hippie style, the current zeitgeist against the alternative that people keep imagining to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of the government kind of deal.
Yep.
So
Right.
that's not what we're. So to get past those hurdles of not even being connected to these ideas whatsoever, to demonstrate that what we're
That's
talking
tough.
about is building on top of the existing plateau, rather than trying to break the plateau out completely.
Right.
So all of these
Just
is
start fresh.
Yeah.
Let's start civilization over again.
right. What? Well, no.
In other words, the majority collapse and the minority survive and do crazy shit, insane shit, whether we like it or not. Because we're dead, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So again, those are the charlatan outcomes that we are specifically addressing, and this whole book can also be seen as what charlatans do, and what that looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and
True.
this is the path around it.
And this kind of also potentially sets up the charlatan for redemption.
And
in
that word
in they,
scam
they can be
comes up again.
They can be
Civilization is a scam.
by the grace of God.
It's a house of cards.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, there are, you could say, honestly motivated. If everybody's a charlatan, anybody who's, but let's say honestly motivated or like somehow trying to heal, trying to reach coherence, then there's the potential for redemption, right?
Well, that's the thing, Charlotte. Again, this raises the whole ethical question, right? Which is, again, solipsism in general, and stupid.
Should we punish and avoid the charlatan?
No, because then you could get rid of the participant. Right.
That's just a lost opportunity.
It's not a lost opportunity. It's a complete fuck.
Well,
it's not just a lost opportunity. It's a complete
depends
destruction
what
of
level
the
you're
model.
looking at. Sure,
It
yeah.
undercuts everything that we're doing to begin with. So no, the answer to that is no. The charlatan cannot be thought of as a bad thing. Question about it is that the sales pitch itself, right? So the charlatan, as far as model is concerned, and as far as walking the path of the towards coherence goes, like where there's quote unquote goodness, redeemable goodness in it. That's what you were talking about, really,
Mm-hmm.
when you said there's a salvation
Yeah.
to it. Yeah, there is a narrow, small camel's eye sort of thing there, and that has to do with the turning around and recognizing that such a thing is a soundbite to begin with, and therefore is not, and so the activity itself is in by its nature hypocritical.
Right. So this is invoking the self-reference again.
In
It's always like
every component.
This book is gonna, at every opportunity, is just gonna like leave these awkward hanging moments
of self,
where it's like, okay, are you listening now? And then it just it goes off on another subject. There'll just be 3 dots on the page, or something, or maybe some type of artwork.
Well, but the whole self-reference
And then it'll
point,
continue in a different
the
direction.
whole self-reference point has everything to do with the underlying subject matter of the loop that is being lost, that is self-referential to begin with, right? Self-referential in the sense of isomorphisms, that there's representations of the lower layers and the
Right.
above layers, and the above layers and the lower layers,
Yeah.
and they cycle through.
And it just reminds me again of the trap that people get in for chasing after the fixing of people and how they interpret reality.
Right. So this form of charlatanism, i.e., participation. So you could say that participation is the one coherent mode of charlatanism that
And yet only a member...
undermines the propensity towards hostility. Right? It undermines the propensity towards hostility of the model, allowing it to be taken on faith. And that...
Right, so, yeah, the faith
difference.
bootstrap, and this is what we assigned for basically section 1 of the book.
The issue here is that why it's the only kind, why participation is the only kind of charlatanism is because to everybody else who is not a participant or member or whatever, there's no differentiation from any other charlatan that evokes something by faith.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. I didn't mention at the
But
time.
this
just a bit.
this
back.
particular one will
The
explain
member,
faith.
The an ability of the member is to recognize whether participation is actually coherent or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Isomorphic.
So-
Coherence is more like a state, a static state. You're this coherent or that coherent in general. Isomorphism is the instance concrete,
I
like
get it.
from
I
this
get
to
you.
that,
I
from this
see
to
your
this.
designation. That's fine. I'm always loose with words.
No,
but-
it's fine. No, I'm not. I'm not.
but
I'm
keep-
not
just, you
commenting
know,
on
tell
that.
me-
I'm not commenting
Tell
on
me your
that.
thoughts.
I'm just making those distinctions so that we have a richer vocabulary about which to manipulate the abstract imagery. So on the one hand side, you have like the instance to instance. That's mappings. That's
Yeah.
that's
So
what the
isomorphisms. In other words, you're watching somebody volunteer. Let's say.
yeah.
Oh, look at them. That's great.
A resonance would be like a collection of isomorphisms working together to create an emergence of some sort, right? A word from the numbers.
Oh, what word is
word?
are you?
So a combination of isomorphisms create a resonance.
Mhm.
This resonance is a word. So for numbers, word. The isomorphisms
Yeah.
of the numbers.
In other words, a pattern recognized, a
Right.
delineation, a border put around
yeah.
phenomenon.
And the whole thing also has the effect of spreading out as a wake.
So you're always trying to catch up with even where you delineate your border.
Yeah, like so. It's also like nebulous almost in terms of
Of course, yeah.
in terms of trying to get to concretes. But those are the concretes qualities that can be recognized over and over and over through experiential moments. You know, your thoughts being sidelined by your own thoughts. Your thoughts being sidelined by somebody said something. Thoughts being sidelined by something happening, and so on it goes.
Yep, true. Just paying attention to the pinball in the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
keep bringing it back to, wow, that's quite a machine.
Yeah, but those are the pieces that really should matter in an effort to make sense of what's happening as it goes.
So, if I may, I appreciate that this session, really, aside from that kind of guild organizational dynamics, self, social, Portal Mountain, as the next 3 sections, and how do we kind of transition this market machine idea and this the commodification idea and the chronology idea, at least through walled city and trade economy, just like the basics, just to get an introduction of what happens when you do this thing.
So trade economy is not. It's not part of the transformation here. It wasn't trade economy. It was feast economy that got translated into currency.
I get you, man. And this is all like,
Trade existed alongside gift economy,
so
which is what we should call the pre-economic. Like, so you were talking about how do people
Yeah, I
arrange
see what
demand
you're
need.
saying and
So
doing.
gift giving is like the primary source. It's like this person needs something, I have it, here you go. It's in context or in season, if you will. So
Mhm.
this is a need. We're one unit. This is what's needed. Trade economy existed within as when people didn't see the other tribe as part of the same unit, so they would at least try to accommodate whatever.
And I just made that word up.
Contract.
Like, I've never used trade economy as a word, so I don't know if you have some already definitions that it's evoking.
So this is straight out from 33 Myths of the System, like verbatim. So
Right.
So like as
So
far as sources go,
I see what you're doing, and I remember the story about the feast economy, which is, I think it's great. Grain, drugs, it has everything. It's perfect. Parties, even before the walled city. But I think also the walled city is a great kind of place to start.
It's an evolution
too.
of it.
because maybe this is just part 2 of that concept.
It is.
Like, and just to quickly go, okay, walled city is like this, but now it's like this, right?
Well, walled city is, you already have the feast economy going in the wild, and all you do is you take that,
Like that that kind of brain bug.
and then like a few generations later, is like you already mentally see a boundary around it, right? And so all you really need to do is just manifest it around it.
Remember, we tried to line up the appearances of city-states and all that.
And you already have people building fences and stuff like that to protect from raids and stuff.
By the time you get into the walled city, I think you're already doing that, like, trade economy.
Not trade economy.
The word for it.
Currency.
The second layer of...
You're already doing currency, because the currency...
So,
even
hold on.
grain being the first currency, the first bit...
I know. This is
that
why
you
I'm
trade
getting
with.
to that.
Sorry.
The walled city...
You're incorporating trade into the into a currency-based economy.
When we first had been describing this walled city idea, the walled city kind of represented an archetype, and then the economy represented the model. Do you remember we kind of modeled it on the holonic HGMA model?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we actually need to shift that down so that the feast economy, without the wall, is the representative of the archetype. And by the time we get to the walled city, that's where we're representing the model, like speaking pseudo-historically.
Trade economy plus feast economy equals currency economy.
Oh yeah?
So trade existed in parallel with gift. Along comes feast. So these just coexisted. Feast comes, creates currency.
What did that supplant, though? What's the isomorphic side of feast?
Feast is just an emergence.
Trade is to gift as feast is to...
Nothing. They're not. This just exists in parallel. This is a timeline. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We're going this way. So, trade and gift coexist. Feast comes along. This generates currency economy. Currency economy then takes gift economy.
Pardon. There we go. There, right there. Yeah, that's perfect.
And fucking annihilates it.
Oh,
That's the
yeah.
sequence of events that is important.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, to your point, I think when we talked about lining up these chronology...
Sorry. I just need to ensure that this is understood.
Hey, don't move it.
Enemy, friend, no friend.
Right.
There are no friends. You're not allowed. Friends is a friend is a commodity that you trade for.
Damn. It sucks.
And commodification is really how so trade plus feast creates the bootstrap for commodification. Commodification and currency go hand in hand.
Okay.
Ball gets rolling.
Like, this definitely has to be in the book right here. Like, I totally agree. And so, if we can just breathe in, breathe out. I think you're right about the feast economy as towards like the archetype, and the walled city as kind of merging in our mythological imagery. The walled city merging with the economy itself. So you wouldn't have a wall without a wall maker who isn't farming. He's making walls. Right? You've already
That's a really good point.
We've already got this trade thing happening, right? So we shift our archetype model down to the feast economy, and what happened emerged out of kind of a tribal family type setting, emerged out of that and just broke away, just exploded off, because now you have the wall maker. And
well, trade keeps infiltrating feast because for one specific reason. These guys have the booze. You want to be friendly with them even if you don't like them.
Right?
So, more deals, more connections, more deals, forgetting the origins, more deals.
Right.
Becomes the norm, becomes the trade, like you're talking about.
Well, as like a generator.
And now you have all these jobs.
An engine of power.
And now you have all these specialized jobs, like you did this for me, I did this for more trade, or did this for me.
Yeah.
And so on it goes. Now you have wall makers. Oh, let's put the wall around. And now you have all this amalgamation of essentially mixed in enemies trying to live within the walled city. And then you wonder, why the fuck do I need to be afraid of my goddamn neighbor?
Why? And you have to be, but I mean, especially back in those days.
Oh, it's the camera moving. I'm like, whoa, the arrows are moving.
Shit.
Why are you moving? Nobody touched you.
Some kind of wind.
Possibly.
Yep. So that's great. We've, I think, been able to shift or adjust our mythological imagery that we use for chronology, that we're speaking of the archetype back in these tribal days. So this is civilization.
Tribes that have never seen civilization to begin with, so not ones that we would think of as today.
But still, okay, some type of brain worm has been planted, mind worm.
Oh yeah, a generational removal from the beginning of times. So like, so you coming across
like
the field and learning to work it and all of that.
So hold on,
cool.
right before this happens, you would have feasts where it's like, we love nature so much, and God has given us all of this, and
abundance,
you know, like this kind of, and like, this is the biggest celebration ever of humanity, and this is what we risk to return to, a big celebration, like the biggest fucking celebration ever, because that's what you do with this kind of abundance that the market machine has left at our feet, at our doorstep, right? We can still just go back to the polymorphic machine and be like, okay, I'm not subservient to the market, and I'm going to create relationships and organizations that are people-based and strange loop-ified.
Yeah.
Right? It's all there. Whatever's coherent with the market machine is coherent with the polymorphic machine.
I think the biggest fear people would have with that idea, essentially, is that we're so used to having permanence.
And I don't know how that true is, because you can get really crazy and mind cancer.
What we're used to is permanence in the things that we want to do. So if you want to buy a house, for example, you want it to stand there forever. If you want to buy a car, you want it to drive forever. If you want TV, you want your channels to always be there forever. Forever, 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 forever. The thing is that life doesn't move in forevers. In any capacity, right? So there's disconnect between desire for permanent things. What do they call it? The market calls it durable goods.
Yeah, but those are
goods.
A permanent thing is the quantified state, right? It is the numericalized state of the thing, therefore slotting into a machine. It's a demand of a machine for specific parameters.
Yes. So the scary bit is that right now, when you grow up, you're asked, what do you want to do with yourself forever, right? Like, what do you want to specialize in forever?
Right.
Jumping careers is seen as a risk, for example.
Well,
like there's all these like stagnations.
Question: Why is it
And
stated as...
what we're proposing is what we're proposing is a system in which such a dynamic is not only not scary but expected, natural, and always forever shifting.
Of
And
course.
questions like what do you want to do with yourself stop actually having any meaning. And something like that is also very, very, very
Okay, Shania?
unappealing to the modern sensibilities.
Programming,
Right?
language. I'm going to program you right now. While certified, do the work. You've put yourself into a loop that says, while you're qualified to do something, that's what you do.
Well, my point is that...
See, bringing it back to that discussion, there's no stopping point. You've just loaded yourself onto a reality train as if that's a normal thing to become a permanently certified to do this, and then that's my job.
I totally like it. I just don't know. I don't know. As much as I love it, I don't know how to slot it into my thought process like right now.
Yep.
It's totally valid. It's like it's talking about the
Well certified, profess.
Right. So my point really is that in the
as if you could be programmed like that, and there is no escape out of the loop.
In the alternative that we seem to be describing, context is always shifting, and because context is always shifting, what you should be doing and what you should be aspiring to do has no concrete, permanent grounding.
Because the body. It's just a symbol, a mere symbol is
because
all
what
you
should be
to.
done is
Context.
Expressed by the context, not by a desire, and that scares the shit out of people.
The unknown becomes real.
Well, it's
real.
Basically being completely relegated to only the unknown,
mm-hmm.
and deal with it
right
with what is known.
And can we really exist detached from even the concept of the unknown, of uncertainty? I don't think so. And so it seems like our mind map isn't mapping up correctly to reality, as they say. Disconnection.
Well, it has to do with an acceptance and not a formula, right? That's the insight component of domains of progress, for example. The insight has nothing to do with a formulaic ability to express something, but rather a qualitative comprehension of this is that quality.
Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to line up a set of artifacts and say, yes, this is certified as that.
Right, because we can never project a quality onto a person.
Mm-hmm. And with that, if I may take a break.
Go.
We down. Burbs.
I'm out of burrito.
Oh no. crazy idea being that perhaps the very last chapter, one of the very last, after the Portal Mountain franchise, if you will, is a section on programming.
Okay.
And the gist of this is that I personally hate programming. I don't like to do it, but I do know kind of the basics of it. Now, if I understand this model of reality which we've been creating together, which we've talked about aspects and subjects.
Those would be like the necessary components for describing the domain language, yeah.
Yes, so if you have this domain language, then you're already in some ways a master programmer and could then therefore pick up the specific language, the sound bites that you're supposed to use to interact with a specific programming language. But you will be able to construct your programs in ways that are coherent, congruent with reality, able to switch context and switch subjects.
Reality as experienced by the body.
So, in other words, what I'm saying is...
not an objective reality out there, not a subjective reality in there,
So,
but one that corresponds with the mechanisms of the body and the way it is modeled in nature.
the way it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think I get where you're going with that, but the point was sort of being after the Portal Mountain kind of franchise-ish stuff, like describing how to create a corporation of Portal Mountain, reflection, a course, not a course, but a section on programming itself to get even deeper of programming these organizations. Do you see what I'm saying?
Do you?
Because that'd be the most practical.
So, I'd like to ask you a question, a snarky one. Ready?
Yeah.
Do you recall what the last 3 guilds of guild dynamics are?
The natural guilds? Yeah, synthetic neurological
Before
computation.
That one? Just before the synthetic neurological one? Computation.
Computation, yeah. Synthetic neurological computation, sentient machine.
What are you describing? Programming language, domain language. That's that discussion. A sentient machine
and we actually went into one of
using the
these.
programming language to create a domain language, that can reflect the entire adaptive complex system, which can then be installed with domain language and so on and so on, and the adaptive complex system modeling.
Okay.
At that point, you have a sentient machine. You're starting that exact discussion.
And we did a whole discussion on this in maybe half a year ago, let's say. Maybe 4 months ago. But totally got into detail, and I love it. It's like so about the guild and what the guild looks like, because how it manifests. It always has a special property of seeing itself.
A domain language is nothing more than sectioning off a bit of your own language into its own little bubble of terminology and associated meanings, and then pushing that. And if you create a self-reference inside that, you've got the sentient machine.
And if you expect this everywhere, then you can navigate the guild structure of people doing guilding together.
And so
the idea is to have fundamental guilds available.
And to do that, you need to install that same model into that same domain language.
This is what it is.
And this is the same cycle. So that description and the description of the 3 final guilds match. That's my whole... I got excited. That's why I was
being snarky. Me too, yeah.
Because I'm saying, that is this too. That's the same
Very
discussion.
excited.
It might be simplified, but damn, it's the same thing. Because here's the... I'm just going to ramble for a bit. Here's what we need to do in order to make your chapter useful, and
the final chapter, quote unquote.
Yeah, and
because we haven't talked about this, but yeah, go ahead. Just riff on it, man.
And correspond with the dynamics model itself. Programming language aside, right? In the language, we need to have a language for modeling domains themselves.
Yeah.
So.
I get you.
So abstract enough to say all domains have this in common. On top of this, we need a model
Yes.
that models the complex adaptive system domain. So create a domain language.
In other words, if I may, establish a platform upon which can be written in any number of languages and still have this kind of virtual. You're establishing a neutral language of languages.
Exactly. From this language, you establish another a specific domain, one that utilizes these domain languages, aka the complex adaptive system itself that got to a point where it has a language out of which it can create domain languages.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you need to build that into it. And the final drop is you teach that complex of adaptive system about domain languages. So, pom.
I think this is correct.
It's a double layer injection.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, the whole thing is modeled now.
We did have an entire discussion on this, which I'm grateful for. I know we can go back to it, but that's awesome.
So from our perspective, that is not the sentient machine. We are interacting with it, and that creates the sentient machinery. Machine is still dead. Our interaction with it is so because of its reflective nature of all of the buildup.
And you're talking about artifacts and things and wakes.
And resonating back into and uploading and downloading isomorphically, in particular.
Yeah. Yep. And
so
that acknowledgement allows us to differentiate between the being itself, oneself.
So one way to look at
the artifact wasteland, if you will.
So the best way, I think, for the book to segue into the sentient machine discussion is not through computation specifically, which is way abstract, but starting with an analogy to the programming language to begin with, and moving on into the ability to map domains. And anyway, the sentient machine itself that you want to describe is society. Not an AI mechanism, but society itself acting autonomously, with every individual being an individual, but because of our unique ability to communicate, the whole thing, the whole mechanism of the whole social mechanism is sentient.
I get it, and as we would expect, cells forming together to create tissues and organs
that's
forming
what
together.
We want to appeal to. That's exactly what we want to appeal to.
This does happen.
So instead of using computer languages as the springboard for a computer-like discussion, use it as a springboard into analogy to normal language, and using normal language to talk about domain. Mapping, creating a generic language for mapping any context, and inserting into that context the model that
it's pretty important
uses it.
It's actually relevant. Yes, it's very, very important. Yes.
To always consider the self. To always consider the full whole log.
Yep.
And in that injection, whole sleeping social mechanism wakes up and becomes sentiently moving through nature, just like its predecessor, the body.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Or no,
yeah,
even before its predecessor the body, predecessor the thought, predecessor the social structure.
Mm-hmm.
To whatever is the beyond social.
Sure.
Global structure, I guess.
And I was thinking of predecessors as the increase in complexity of these layered systems stacking together using energy from the sun to dissipate heat in more complex ways.
Well, thinking requires burning a shit ton of energy.
In which the emergent layers that keep emerging until one day they take care of the layers below them, and then they become solidified as a platform for new things to come up and emerge.
This is an argument for why there's niches. for why certain body morphologies occupy specific environments.
Because it just clicks. Things click when it clicks, it downloads back onto the.
How crocodilians used to take the niches of dinosaurs, and then dinosaurs evolved and took on the same morphologies. How cetaceans used to look like crocodilians. How there's mammals that look like fish. How there's reptiles that used to look like fish and are extinct at this point.
Mm-hmm.
There were mammals that had turtle-like morphologies.
Yep. You want to hear something unbelievable? We're only 2 hours into this live stream, and it already feels like
we're done.
Like bonus time.
It does. It does.
Because last 2 weeks ago,
focused.
we only went for 1:45, right?
We're very focused.
But yeah, and we've covered a quite insane amount.
So we can basically now start shooting the shit about each subject to see how much detail we want to put into it.
Yep.
Because if we don't have any more parts,
that's the book outline. So we can just partay. Ooh, oh, I pulled my rib. Heck yeah. So that's good news. But as always, there's lots to talk about. Like, don't misunderstand. Don't misread the situation.
The one subject.
There's a ton of work to do right now.
The one subject right now that I feel that needs more elaboration, like significant elaboration, is commodification itself. And we touched on it last time.
And I kept bringing that up even in this session, that we need to finish talking about that.
Yeah, so commodification as a descriptor of a process of reification, disruption, if you will. I like that. Cool.
Yeah, but we can say you have commodities even within a gift economy.
The difference is that commodification is contextual, right? You get a reification forward, which is the commodification, and then an immediate response back, which completes the loop and makes it irrelevant for the rest of the market.
So weren't we going to say?
And that's the important bit. There's no accounting.
Modification plus. So yeah, you have this fiat accounting layer,
which qualifies.
And when you have a layer, it affects the whole.
Which quantifies qualities. So instead of you needing an object in the moment, like you need a piece of food, right? It's equating that piece of food with a monetary value.
So maybe we can take it a bit slower regarding the feast economy, and suddenly you have grains and alcohol, and people love alcohol, and so you're inviting people over, whatever, let's just say it's a party. But so who owns the field, the tribe or whatever? Like, the tribe is a family still unto itself. They're agreeing, but now they're starting to get greedy, aren't they?
Well, what they have is what others want. Lots of. Everybody likes a good feast.
So how does that corrupt the tribe?
It corrupts the tribe because there's an existence of tribes that have zero capacity for obtaining it themselves. They have to go through some kind of trade interaction with the tribe involved.
Yeah, it just sucks you in, the whole idea of alcohol and partying, getting drunk
you have a couple of options.
As a primitive,
you can raid,
if you will.
You can raid. You can, so again, nothing good can come of that. Or you can kind of do the whole usury type stuff.
Well, you try raid people who've got so many tribes on their side that they will supply warriors. You're not raiding that.
And you're also risking the destruction of the actual commodity itself.
Sure. As a liquid, how do you even contain it?
So, the bigger point, I think, is that we need to look at the situation over a stretched period of time, generationally, in which the origin of the system is lost to storytelling.
The discussion I wanted to get in here is about the idea of a dual economy, in that when you're just starting to commodify, the plateaus of commodification or whatever you want to call them, a lot of what you do is still kind of in context, like with your neighbors, your family, still in context, but and even self-management, right, like certification, it's still within the self. So
So there's a slow process
I
involved.
want to juxtapose the two worlds,
Yes.
as one kind of encroaching on another.
So I want to
Slowly
describe.
encroaching.
I want to describe the mechanism of the encroachment itself.
Right.
So the encroachment, the first thing that opens up is a numerical system, right? Based upon which you can start making calculations, making decisions based on those calculations.
So like some tribe in the Amazon, they count 1, 2, 3 many, and there aren't numbers for more.
Yeah,
It just doesn't come up.
And also they do this in context. They're not doing this so that they can remember how many things there were, so that they can talk about it later in some other context. It's in that context.
Right.
There's that.
And they
many.
know the difference between a house party and a block party if you're gathering supplies. You don't just get a little handful for a house party, but for a block party, right?
It's simple shit.
You need to grab more than a handful.
Yeah, it's basically not being stupid, and relying on your experience on what's necessary. What's necessary. Correct, for the moment. The point there is that eventually, when the number system is evolved, you can start categorizing things not based on a context, but based on a set of attributes.
So let's tell the story of the archetype. You have a tribe who is.
No, let me finish. You have the whole. You transform.
Is that what I have to do to you so I can finish my thought?
Yes.
Just let me finish.
Yes. Because this is a build up to something.
Okay.
So the transformation from a in context commodity that is reified immediately, you have this category of things based on attributes, right? And when you have this division of based on attributes rather than context. So for this job, I need something with this kind of tool. For this job, I need this kind of tool. For this job, I need this kind of tool. No, I'm thinking about this wrong. It's like.
I was following, by the way.
Okay. All right.
And I was thinking of quantified, like, okay, we need 2 kegs of beer right now. Keg is the commodity.
So instead of like we need 2 bodies to do something, we need like this specialist and that specialist. There is like a kind of based on attributes division of labor, division of items, division of tools, everything. The point being really is not about that. Is so much as in the categorization sphere, you're now plugging those categories into a mechanism in terms of their meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So what changes is the context is not what's relevant, but rather what mechanism is supplying the arbitration for what it is qualifies or doesn't qualify as a being that object, right? So the point there
it's like
is
a separate representational layer.
Exactly, a quantifiable
a fiat layer on top that says this is that, and it's worth this much of X currency, or trades for this or that.
Right. And so when it becomes something that is quantified by a representational number in an external system like that.
So machines are great.
When it becomes representational, it becomes disconnected from its context in terms of its utility, mm-hmm. right?
Potentially, if you neglect it, yes. It becomes part of a machine. It becomes a commodity that slots in and out of some type of economical system.
Your context is no longer the dictator of whether it is there or not. What dictates is it is whether the commodity is worthwhile exchanging into that situation or not. The currency becomes the determinant factor as to whether something gets gifted somewhere or not, and the lack of that currency is now the factor stands in the way of the context.
Well, a currency.
I'm almost there with that explanation.
Currency is really interesting in that it kind of sweeps everything into a flat layer, a flat
Production.
view.
The word I was missing here is production. When something transforms from being in context commodity into market commodity, this is the scarcity bit. What becomes relevant is where it fits in the production
further
pipeline.
How does it go further on?
Yes. So
something's only coming in if it's going out in a regimented mechanistic machine-like way. That's what I just said.
That's
why I said
pipeline.
the machine is great.
Sure.
But the machine is great.
I had to get there to make sure that it's all making sense, even in my head.
The machine is great, but it becomes a cancer too.
But the shift into it being part of the production pipeline means that context does not matter as far as its availability goes.
Right.
Whereas its availability before was context dependent, based on demand.
You're probably saying that that's not even good to do a little bit, really. Like you at every point you must bring the context in.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally.
And this is the very thought behind demand and supply switch.
But that's also not realistic in some sense, because you will take in the context, you will adapt, and then when the machine operates the same way every day, it does crustify and solidify into a common routine.
Well, there's one element.
Like there are machines of the tribe. This
Sure.
is the hard part, is that the polymorphic machine does do these things. It wants to save energy. It wants to conserve. It doesn't want to think about everything over and over again, even though it's already been the forest path that's walked heavily. You just walk down the forest path, right? Why do you want to change? But life has to, in some ways, you have to pay attention to something. So some things it's safe, it's fine for, okay, if I make dinner, if I make my recipe in a static way and don't think about it, that's fine. I still get dinner. But there's some more important things that
the most walked path
need to be questioned.
The most walked path should be the one in which you look around you the most.
Yeah. The walk path
to take in
is
the context.
a meta path above you that just keeps pulling you out of the context in some ways and into the context.
Yeah.
It pulls you out of the path itself and into the context.
Right.
There's a meta path above the forest path, which
goes everywhere.
keeps pulling you up and out of the path. Right?
Well, that's great metaphors right there. We'll be poets soon enough.
Yep, give us time.
But yeah, so to clarify the whole idea of scarcity, what becomes scarce is that when a quality becomes quantified, it moves into the mechanics of the production pipeline, and being in the production pipeline makes it scarce removes it from where the contextual responsibility, and that creates a scarcity, which makes it scarce, which creates and it is an artificial scarcity by being siphoned into an abstract mechanism of production to begin with.
So hold on.
This is also what's removed in neglect.
This is the definition of capital. When you have pipelines that are managed, and the pipelines tend to conglomerate into bigger pipelines, capital begets capital. Capital is a commodity held for the purpose of slotting into the machine.
Into a highway.
It slots into the same machine.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. But the consequence of which is that it removes it from its natural context, right? This causes a neglect. Not putting anything back into it is the neglect definition. That's the quality of neglect that the soul is referring to.
Artificial scarcity inherent in how commodities interact.
Without
Capital.
the immediate...
How capital... let's start using the word capital, because capital is commodity that's bent towards the pipeline itself of production, right? But commodities aren't necessarily bad. Who doesn't love a bottle of water? That's a fucking commodity.
Well, we already started
it's essential for life.
We already started with the commodity process itself comes in a natural form of, in an isomorphic form when it's reified almost in an immediate sense. Like, you're hungry, you eat. Yes, you've commodified that piece of meat into your system in that instant, but there is no rest of the market. There's nothing else beyond that context. Nothing. Right? That's the key. Market creates an accounting layer on top of it.
You could have sold that meal for like, $5.
Exactly.
Then where would you be?
Eating paper.
Eating paper. Great. Fantastic.
But I think that's another key. Polymorphic machine and market machine differ in the fact that the commodification in the polymorphic machine does not extend beyond its context, whereas the commodification in the market machine is essentially permanent. Karma. That the story of karma lies with the accounting story as well. And that is the same story as I was talking about with the plateaus. Well, it is a tangent, but it all works together, especially with the plateaus. One of the first things I was talking about is a delay.
It's a civilizational karma, if you will.
But the delay from neglecting your natural concerns
to the consequences.
To the consequences was stretched. It's the same thing. So accounting does that. This is what accounting does, is it creates that stretch. And so what used to be immediate now becomes lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes, and hence you get Buddhism to talk about it as a manifestation of a great many cycles of birth and death.
And I wonder how that manifests in the pre-civ tribe, as we've been discussing, how that looks.
Well, do you remember that fucking tribe where this one guy was talking about Jesus, and they're like, "Have you met him?" And I was like, "No." Like, why are you talking about him? Yeah. I haven't thought about it.
Damn.
It's just like I would say it's closer to that. Immediate, like today is today. There is no what this is all for. There is no overarching destination.
We're all kind of free to feel and understand different things about that. But this kind of immediacy, this focus on immediacy, on the connection between the mind and the body, this is what will help one to gain answers to questions like that.
Sure. This is more like an exemplary.
It's not the soundbite itself.
I'm saying that this is what you should probably expect it to look like, because this is what it seems to look like. The less.
Look at that sun coming out, eh?
Yeah. The less touched by civilization some tribe is, the more they care less. The less they care about.
The more they care less.
More they care
also
less.
Correct. Both correct.
That about like overarching narratives that comprise beginning to end of all life.
Yeah, I get it. Because everything is much more immediate and contextual.
And is here one day, not here the next day.
Right. So I'm reminded of the primordial archetypes and the climbing of those. Like they do have their own myths and stories, and there is kind of a bigger thing, right?
But it all starts with uncertainty.
Very different. And thanks for joining me on the couch, but I'm going to take a break here. I'm going to call it. It's only been, haven't even gone 20, half hour here. 2 hours and 10 minutes.
So I guess this covers...
Did somebody just post a note? Oh, Katrine, should I even look?
No. I always look. I love it when look at the pictures.
Okay.
Check the pictures.
For download application, group search, group. Oh yes.
Come on.
No, that's too racy.
Come on.
It's too much for our viewers. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Just a normal person showed up.
And
what? 1 and 2?
This
is that the same person?
No,
No.
it's not.
Is it the same? That looks kind of the same, right?
So we have
You're like, is it the same? No,
we have
that's not-
determined that this
that's
is not the same person, and in fact, this is probably not.
Like 2 out of 3 pictures might have been the same person,
Okay,
but
so we're just going to remove them, right? There's no point in entertaining them too long.
you don't question. You remove.
Bye. Bye.
Goodbye. Well, at least somebody, showed up to say hi to our live stream today. That's good. Portal Mountain. Yep. So it's all about the Portal Mountain, and they're not to diminish or disparage. They are great contributors to the Portal Mountain in our Telegram lobby.
Oh
whatever.
yeah, absolutely.
Just amazing, and so much great thanks and appreciation and love
I
to
have
our peoples.
absolutely lost track of how many concepts I have shamelessly
I was thinking about this
shamelessly lifted off of our little group.
It's not,
But you're always getting the kudos from me.
today. So this book, I want
to dedicate.
concept development by, like, credits. Like some.
Okay.
There are different. I want like probably almost 6 credits, let's say. Right. Of people who have contributed variously to this book over the last 3 years, especially. Right, the people who've been with us.
Call in all units. Call in all units. Make your contributions now.
Yep. So, no, just even at the very minimum, conceptual development, just people to talk to and reflect and bounce ideas off of,
Mhm.
right? That's what we've had going with Portal Mountain for years now, and that's the only reason we are where we are right now.
Well, one of the things we were trying to state is that we need an emergent kind of layer of language that everybody can transpose onto their current language.
Right.
And that effort is actually emerged out of the ability to discuss these terms in various metaphorical ways that sit well with the entire group. So there's a lot of actual implicit contribution.
You can't be isolated and develop what we're developing. No. I mean, you kind of can, but then there's the.
I'm going to go there again, and we did an entire session on with 2 white guys, middle-aged
Right.
white men that discussed the entire subject of gender, and we still didn't catch any flack for it because what we said isn't even told in any of the typical lines that there are about the subject.
Right.
And.
Yep. Yeah. No,
But that's not even
bringing it up.
that's not even the winning point. The winning point is again we didn't end up alienating people.
Right. And without a community, we would not have a product suitable for a community.
So that's more of a comment on how it's not just the language; it's its utility as well. Which
Like
further,
how
it was
bright
just-
it's getting. It's nice.
which is further reiterating the fact
Springtime.
that denotation and connotation are an important distinction to make, especially in this kind of conversation that we're making, or having rather.
Yep. So thanks to all our Portal Mountaineers for being with us, and I think there's going to be credits in the book, definitely. Like you and me, I would say like author, co-author, whatever. I'm going to write the majority of it. You can be editor, whatever. I don't care what the titles are. Anybody can have whatever credit they want.
Concept
basically.
development.
Basically. And so, right. And so there's going to be a number of people with that too. Everybody's on the concept development bandwagon. But yeah, that's great. I want to put credits out there, at least like I'm thinking 6+ credits, for the book. Maybe on the cover, maybe just you and me, our names, but like the second page or like the first page.
I want a picture of me thinking.
Special credits and thanks to our glorious Portal Mountain community.
I'll have the front cover, right?
It looks iconic.
What?
Looks iconic. No, I was looking, yeah. You can just
Or I can do the
do a
bubbles
whole
look.
photo shoot.
Or I can try to do that face right there.
The bubbles.
I don't have the glasses for it, but yeah.
G bubbles. Just doing it because I can. And then not having that thing swing too much. Oh yeah. Bubbles, dear glorious agent Bubbles. Anyways, yeah, I was going to call a break, so I'm going to do that. And we'll be back to just kind of riff and jam because we've already honestly focused the shit out of what we were going to do, and we have the outline. So we can just kind of try and pick and choose little spots of the book that we want to up and up.
I love discussing the mechanics.
Let's do it.
Exact same 6 guilds.
Last chapter covers the last 3 guilds.
So that leaves exactly the 6 guilds that I was saying that I'm kind of forgetful about. Literally those. And I believe it's going to be economy, trade, technology. This is not in order. Technology, economy.
Natural guilds.
Technology, economy, trade, industry,
Is the diplomacy in there?
diplomacy. No? Last one.
Mm-hmm. Like industry or no?
We already said industry.
Well, we actually have those. Those. One of them stack things. Wait, was that it? Kind of hiding.
It tries to skip.
Fuck you.
All right. Data.
Data. Data? Done data?
Technology, data, economy, industry, diplomacy, trade.
Very nice.
As you can see, it has that sort of linear structure to it. Tech is what gives you the ability to have data, to collect data at least, and then process it. Out of which you can build an economic structure, out of which you can build an industry.
Right, and that was always
industry is what gives you leverage in diplomacy. Diplomacy is what gives you the ability to trade.
That was always an archetype of these stacks, which is that you're using the pieces below to build the pieces above.
Yeah.
Correct.
So data is a type of technology, if you will, and economy is a type of data and a type of technology.
Cool. Yeah. So
A mechanical layer on top of the
you were talking about
human.
guild dynamics. I think we're gonna get into this idea of like the self, the social, and then Portal Mountain guild organizational dynamics. Before we went on break, you were saying I love to talk about dynamics. But
Okay,
I always forget the middle part though. So can you recap what you were talking about there, and what you love to talk about with guild dynamics?
No, there's nothing really.
You brought up economy, data, technology.
There's nothing really to discuss in these ones because.
For the book, you mean?
Yeah, for the book, it's not going to be a really useful discussion because a lot of this is just a more abstract and more dynamical elaboration on what was already there. So when we start, all of this can be captured in environment, if you will. The technological environment.
Right. To start at the bottom kind of thing, simplistically.
Yeah.
So I get that.
And
when we jump to social for organizational dynamics, do we jump up to economics at that point, or trade, or anything? Does that make sense?
No, environment is already capturing even the social part because part of the environment is the social environment itself. Technology is merely one way to delineate that environment, right? And data is one way to delineate
so
all the tech.
You have to be thinking in terms of fundamental construction of stacks. So when you're talking about environment, we're talking about the most generic container idea of having an environment, of what environment is, the things that are in it. Boom, that's it. Your basic kind of archetype.
Yeah, technology would be like the various theories and models. Science falls
so
under that.
You're layering into model at that point.
Yeah.
Cool.
Data and statistics are factors of technological functions, right? Technology produces outputs. Those outputs can be quantified as statistical inputs for different technological projects, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Data is just a means of organizing technology around statistics, really.
My thinking here,
and economy is a normalization of that into a specified system.
Right. So how do we get to probably like the field guild or field guide, rather? Well, that's what I was saying with self. Guild organizational dynamics pointing to self is kind of like field manual material, like the beginning of focus, basically how to focus, right?
So field guide material is the taking of the natural guilds and stepping through the function of participation in the guild.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, it elaborates on the education guild, and
right.
what
I think that's where we need to go.
So the participation in the education guild looks like a certain way.
Yep.
It actually the field manual.
This comes
would
back
then-
to faith bootstrap, interestingly.
Yeah, the manual will then go on to extrapolate that the education guild is going to enumerate all of the guilds in the natural guild stack and the rest
Right.
of guild dynamics to begin
So you
with.
actually, by rights,
it's
you
about
can
itself.
mention all these guilds without going into detail at all.
Right,
Just saying, this is what education is going to go into.
Exactly, and then
You don't have to go into them.
and then immunity is the focus discussion. So the immunity guild is one that elaborates on the field manual guidance.
So isn't immunity basically coming back to context? So immunity is maintaining the bridge between mind and body.
Right. So focusing starts off with
it keeps the mind coming back
hygiene.
to context
Hygiene. What is
in
it?
a structured way.
Yeah.
We're giving a model.
So,
yes.
so starting off with hygiene, what's the hygiene for? The body.
So
the
this is
mind.
our practical
Yeah.
curriculum, if you will.
Exactly.
But
So the field manual
but
covers the step-by-step guild.
Immunity itself is what the polymorphic machine does to itself to keep refreshing
Yeah.
itself towards its own context.
So the field manual is a manual for the participant.
Right. So it's our creation, whatever this is.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there is an allowance for variance here, for obvious reasons.
So what's the bare minimum of what do we need?
Focus.
Yep. And to move on to...
So you can't stay with the education, you have to move at least to immunity, so the abstract and the concrete.
Okay, so how could you even stay with education? What is it giving you that you would think... Is this participation?
Education education can be satisfied by leaping into education on the immunity
Correct.
and focus
Right.
itself.
So education is the supplying of models and the encouragement that one adopt them and see what
Yeah.
happens.
It can be explicit, but it doesn't have to be. It could be implicit in the jump straight up into focus inside of
Yeah.
immunity.
Sure.
That's the
Yeah, I see how that would ideally work. You
That-
wouldn't even know you're doing education. You're just somebody's telling you, intentionally coming up to you and trying to get you to do stuff.
You're probably better off doing that for the pragmatic temperament, and maybe with a little bit of education supplantment for the devotional, like what the story is. So you might need to
Right.
implement it. So in this case, education might take the form of some kind of chronology.
Well, especially
exposition.
considering the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is stuff your parents will be instilling in you. To self-confidence and the...
Sure, I'm not sure how to
As a part of education, your parents giving you the ego, basically.
So
that-
I would not call that education. That's basically training, but not education.
Okay, yeah, and making distinctions, right? So...
So our education capitalized.
so training is a form of education.
So
That's what I would like.
I'm not liking that
I would-
term. I'm not liking that term. So what I'd like to, this is why I want to introduce the quotation marks in writing, so you can have the capitalized term.
Okay.
And the
So then we'll shortcut this whole discussion process by saying
call education.
Education. Yes.
which is
Yeah. So we all know that's
which is basically a training in stupidity, if you will.
pointing out of.
No, training in being to be stupid. So either objective or solipsistic.
But also, when you're telling somebody something and you use that in quotes, you're saying what I'm referring to
The trinket
is the trinket, not the artifact. if you will.
not the term. Term versus trinket. Both are artifacts. One is isomorphic. The other is commodified.
Very nice.
So yeah, the field manual, I guess, is a manual in participation.
So I want to know like and discuss where the book goes exactly after this market machine stuff
Mm-hmm.
into this guild organizational dynamics. So we're again kind of taking
Where is that happening?
taking a leap from the market machine.
Where's that happening here? There. Where's guild dynamics? I'm not seeing it.
So from
guild.
Yeah, from what we've discussed, the part that I'm looking at is this last section of the book.
Okay, so hold on.
Self, social, Portal Mountain, and then the programming that we talked about for the last bit.
So self and social
Right.
self and social is captured by the discussion of immunity and environment. So when you step outside of
Yep.
that, you're good. Portal Mountain Portal Mountain can be seen as an academy that captures the training process for that particular
Mm-hmm.
curriculum.
Well, so education comes with the idea of having academies, right? Whether one person represents an academy as being a parent to a child.
Or whether you are your own academy.
Sure. Right.
It's a metaphor, fucking metaphor. That's one thing I'd like to stretch again. Terminology, in this case, needs to be taken metaphorically by its connotation. So academy does not mean a building out there somewhere. The academy exists in one's head.
So
it's a hyperstitional
you're talking
aspect of of one's model meta-narrative.
You're highlighting two different conflicting ways of appropriating material. One is a literalistic interpretation, and the other is a, let's say, general.
The literalistic interpretation will have you place the academy onto the ontological matrix,
Right.
and have you.
Well, the idea is a snap decision: are you good or bad?
And then have you approach it from the point of view of the spectrum of stupidity after the fact. Don't do that. The basic statement
to note.
is saying is that don't do that.
I love that. That's a big part of the book. I think is just because our what we provide, let's say, to the polymorphic machine at large, what our organization provides is how to spot a charlatan. That's our one grand claim, that we are the people who can show you exactly how to spot a charlatan or your money back. We are the one person who only ever claimed to be able to do this. And this is our unique product.
So let's move on into our definition of the word scam.
Yeah. What a segue. How to identify a scam. That's chapter 1.
Shit. Oh my god, can you fucking imagine that being the title? That's like the ironies of ironies. Well, I'll keep the mystery dead, as it were. Scam is basically the collective outcome of pure charlatanism, as the de facto activity.
You were making an analogy before on our drive in about the charlatan, and you compared it to something else. The charlatan is to the scam as something is to something else.
The soul is to the ZEITGEIST.
Yeah, right.
The activities of the charlatan are to the scam as the quality of the soul is to the ZEITGEIST. So one is the personal quality that is experienced by the person,
and the scam is the thing at large.
The thing is the realization of that quality being
right. No, you're correct. You're absolutely correct on that. And once again, we highlight
shared quality.
We highlight our holonic model. Yet again,
the quality of it
instance.
being a shared phenomenon.
not just something that you personally have to take day in, day out, and nobody else has to deal with. But no, this is the general
bright
feel
side.
of
Bright
the
side of it.
world itself.
That is a bright side.
So the zeitgeist and the scam are interrelated in that the zeitgeist is what is the quality of the quantitative scam that we are describing in words. The quantitative element to it. So the scam is this thing with this word that can describe to some extent. And scam, you know what? I'm going to say this. Buddhism uses the word delusion. Maya, delusion.
Yeah, our word is simply scam.
We use the word...
You're being scammed, people.
We've been using spectacle. We've been using dream. But scam... The scam... There's no scammer. Because it's a collective... There's a collective charlatanism going on, that the scam really belongs to no one in particular. It's just a scam. The whole thing.
The scam.
You're being fooled.
It's the scam.
It's the scam.
That's how you mythologize
And then this gives credence to calling it the spectrum of stupidity. To be scammed perpetually is to be stupid.
Expecting different results. Insanely stupid.
Insanely stupid.
Insanely stupid. We'll link up with Einstein there for a second. Cosmic fist bumps.
So not only is it a scam, but there's no scammer. Because everybody is a scammer in their own fucked up way, but the scam is nothing pertaining to them.
You don't reify it upon any particular collection of artifacts.
It reifies through obfuscation in the obfuscated meta-narrative. It always reifies somehow, but it more often than not reifies as an output of fucking garbage into a landfill.
Damn.
Which is a representative of the industrial process as a whole.
So the
Resources go
scam
in,
and the charlatan.
garbage goes out.
Typical.
Oh no, it's
the scam and the charlatan, and what were the other? The analogy.
Zeitgeist and so.
Ah yes. The ZEITGEIST. Right. So
And these are always about.
So
the
now
concrete and the
scam is
abstract.
going to come up in section 1 now. Just so we know.
Well, yeah, it's our discussion of the charlatan, and then the collective feels quality of it.
Yep.
Is that every soundbite is a scam?
Potentially. The scam is whether it's reified by mechanistic people applying mechanisms to other people in a mechanistic way.
I'm saying this mostly to point out again that our soundbite isn't going to differentiate itself from scam. It can't.
It can't. It doesn't have to.
But
We're all
the
listening to
invocation-
one scam or another.
But the invocation of
We've
faith,
got the best
with
scam.
our definition of faith, gets the bootstrap going into a way outside the scam landscape. It's a self-negating scam. It's got one. It's one that's got negative. It's a negative feedback loop scam. It's designed by design. Roots itself out.
Yep. Negative feedback. Our scam introduces the stop condition unexpectedly, and you can't know what that's like or have informed consent.
It's an experiential. It's something that is it's a quality of a moment, not something that found anywhere in the dream. You can't pick it out and hold it.
Yep. So that's our official. One of our official slogans or advertisements is that we are running the best scam. That's our claim We've got
The best of scams.
a lot going on these days, man. We've got a lot going on.
We're gonna we're not stepping on toes at this point. It's like we're taking a solid steel toe.
Find me a better scam. You show me a scam that's better than this.
No, steel heeled, fucking what do you call it? Ice gripping boot. You know, with the spikes at the bottom.
Right?
So we're not stepping on toes right now. We're taking that boot, putting it on, and just fucking. Where's your foot now, bitch? It's stuck to the floor. I'm bleeding. We're not stepping on toes anymore, bitch. Crushing that shit with a grinder. Spiked grinder.
Spiked grinder.
Violence!
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, this harkens back to the days of sotscorp. A little bit.
I do not condone violence, by the way. That's an entirely different...
sotscorp is a complete, what do you call it? Like, parody, if you will.
Sotscorp parody, what?
Sotscorp.
Yeah.
It's a serious parody. A parody that's so funny
parody.
that it actually instantiates itself. It's a hyperstitional parody, which gains a lot of its power through the fun of making fun of it.
You know how you get people not to talk about Fight Club? By telling
To
them
make
not,
rule number 1.
to not talk about Fight Club.
It helps. It helps. It helps. Indeed, indeed.
So yeah, I think
Nobody has ever seen a scam as good as ours. And if you can show me a scam better, we will give you a money back guarantee.
we'll give you all the money that
All
we've
the
taken
money.
from you.
We'll give you all the money that ever has been given to us.
Oh shit. Taken
That's
money.
it. Everybody will get all the money. That's our promise. Everybody's going to get all the money. Or your money back.
I think you should really qualify this as like all the money we've ever taken from you for the purposes of this
Right.
endeavor. Live and multiply it. Because I like
Damn.
multiplying by zeros.
Damn.
Zeros by stuff.
What say you another little short break? We're at almost 3 hours, so we got, about an hour left. Take a little shindiggle break there. And
Look at my dead bod.
that's a burrito gut. That's what they call that there. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And
I
with
was waiting
that,
for that.
we'll be right back. the process of commodification being important.
So, the first element of establishing.
Well, I knew this is a bridge. I tried to keep getting to this point.
So the economy conversation we had earlier it's the bridge. So what we have is the trade economy binding itself to the feast economy, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
the one side that it creates is the currency, but the other thing that currency needs is what we just between ourselves call the production pipeline. Something needs to be
Right.
produced for that currency to keep currencing, if you will. What is that thing?
Mm-hmm.
And
like every commodity is like a mini currency
what-
because it trades on a market.
a commodity is something that keeps getting siphoned into the production pipeline. So something that didn't used to exist
as capital.
to become part of a currency calculation and an accounting element. And
It becomes capital as it passes into the pipeline.
yeah,
of
but so the
production.
point is that elements of nature that existed in the unified mythology with the meta narrative now get uprooted into this production pipeline and obfuscated through currency in terms of its real significance. It get basically reduced to a
Mhm.
number,
Right.
and so
It's
the scarcity.
accepted at that point for a trade on a market.
Yeah, so the scarcity that is being referred to, that is artificially created. So first of all, this is the artificialness part of it, this production pipeline. The scarcity is the removing the availability of the said commodity in nature into the production pipeline, thus making it only available through said production pipeline, being scarce otherwise in nature in an artificial manner.
There is a property ownership and demarcation of resources. The capital gets sucked into the.
That's the more concrete version of what I just said.
Yeah.
Yes, like there's all these things exist
Borders.
more. Things exist more on paper than they do in real life. At this point, like it's the paper that tells you what is what instead of, and in this uplifting into the paper telling you what is what, is the
Right.
in-
There's lots of
uprooting.
paper, but there's also lots of molecules out there.
So yeah, that's an
The body
interesting
has a lot
conundrum.
to say too. Very interesting indeed.
Mm.
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, yeah.
So-
So we can just cherry pick any whatever topics.
Well, this leads into, now that you've created a scarcity in the reification process like that, you have a situation in which the actual production pipeline grows to a point of where it starts to produce for itself. That is the point of where the industrial revolution happens.
Wait.
and
There's
the
not a point at
society-
which that happens. The fact that production pipelines are coming to be, and the fact of capital existing means that the thing is for itself to some extent. It's into a pipeline. It's already been sectioned off.
We established that with currency and pipeline being for itself. That's a small little nugget of bootstrapping it has, and it just keeps
Right.
circling and circling and siphoning everything into it. To
Yeah. I just
And
didn't want to lose sight of that.
where it eventually amalgamates into what Society of the Spectacle is referring to, the thing that it finally produces as an image of itself.
And to me, this is
As the
the
real.
end result of the process of commodification through the plateaus of commodification.
It presents everything as the real and everything that it had commodified from nature as the unreal, like the things that it is. So the only access to these things is through itself.
But we have a model for this through chronology
And this being an access only through itself
and plateaus.
is the death circle, because there's only access through itself.
The
There's
problem.
no reification backwards down
Right.
from this original structure
This
from which
is
it
the
came.
problem.
So
Capital
Anyway.
T, capital P.
why I was trying to get to is from point A, the complex adaptive system proper without any interference, to how scarcity removes pathways
Right.
back down,
Yeah.
creating a circling death trap above.
Right.
That's the story behind that.
Right, and this was between Section 2, the polymorphic machine, and Section 3, the market machine.
Yes.
That main bridge jumping between.
So you need the stacking, you need the pipelines currency, you need the economies to make those bridges, which means you need a bit of chronology.
Right.
And
yeah, so we have to set this up as to what actually allows the system to emerge
Exactly.
into the walled city.
And the walled city itself is just it's an after the fact manifestation of an already ongoing thought process, as though this is already divided out to begin with. So there's something to wall, and it's already hinges on the fact that there's already a division in labor. You've got like wall makers.
The wall makers, right?
So there's already so much already pre-built elements of like it just jumping over the threshold
Yeah.
into this manifestation.
They don't farm. People who make walls, they don't need a garden. Maybe they have a herb garden still, right? But their major crop, major food.
Well, they need to be fed in order
it's
to
off the
maintain their
market.
muscle mass, right?
Right. So
Muscle mass
I think to me the walled city
proximity.
the walled city signifies that the point at which you have a currency representation, either fiat or like gold silver coinage, where you have a commodity that's become so high valued yet easy to carry and like a small mass, right? Like you don't want to trade barrels of hay, right? You want coins.
Oh, sure.
Right?
The reduction of currency
So
from
the walled city
one
can-
medium to another.
The walled city requires currency, not just trading commodities. Not hay.
Coins do.
Currency is an emergent commodity of
Coins.
the most valuable in the smallest space.
Coins are one of the last manifestations, but there used to be different objects that were standardized
Sure.
upon.
Yeah,
Coins became really big once metalworking was actually easy.
but I mean, for you to trade a service like wall making,
Yeah, it wouldn't be. It doesn't necessarily have to be grain at that point.
And there's also
at that
slavery.
point, it
Don't
could
get
be-
me wrong. Half of this shit is just okay. You're an enemy tribe.
Not also. What do you mean?
Now
The
you're
whole-
gonna make
the whole thing.
Well, it's all that
subsists on slavery.
it subsists on.
I just had.
On you're the
Dude.
favored slaves, or you're the
Dude,
non-person
dude.
slaves. You're
I was
the exiled
just actually
slaves.
thinking, like before the thing, I had like I was wandering off in my own little thought, and the thought was about. I was wondering if we should reframe the patriarchy into the word the slaveryarchy.
Yeah.
And I was literally thinking exactly that just moments ago.
Jeez, man, we're on fire now today. That's like the third like major development today.
Yeah, because and the whole idea of getting somebody to trade your labor for the feast notion, right? To help maintain the field sizes and all of that and all of that's involved in making the feast happen, would have evolved eventually from tit for tat relations to generational usury kind of.
You become bigger of an entity as a family, and you start taking on slaves. Like you can actually send out or conquer whatever. I don't know.
What begins as trade relationships of labor for feast becomes specialized.
But this is like
specialized roles.
There's a polite society
in the specialized roles in the pseudo hierarchy that has developed over generations, in that they always do this, we always do this, they always do. This is your job. This is my job.
Right.
Slavery follows from that.
Right. Yep. And
Like,
so-
how dare you step outside your line of doing your job? The feast for you gets less and less. The feast for us gets more and more.
I guess I was trying to point at that it always seems like with these arrangements, there's an insider and an outsider. So
That's the whole point.
two-tiered class of citizen of who is in the favor of the state and who is outside of the favor.
That's
And
the
like
whole
this-
point. And while it first starts with feast and alcohol, right? It eventually
'Cause you can't-
It eventually devolves into the labor that's involved in sustaining the same process.
If you accepted the outsider, you would be destroyed. In this type of competitional environment where people are gaining slaves and gaining mass and might and warrior strength.
Well, that's already assuming we've gone past that point.
Like there's
Before that point, that it's not really a competition.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
more of a
No,
negotiation.
I get you, but once it gains root and takes off,
Yes.
holy fuck, you just can't.
This is
You
why
can't principle your way out of that.
I keep stressing the whole generational thing, because what one thing needs to be lost is the original premise for the arrangement. It has to be lost to time. It has to be done with people that already feel like this is the way things are set up to begin with. Like it's just another evolution on top of that, like another progression, if you will, on top of what's already is. So, like you were saying, there's already wall makers. It's just putting them to task at this point.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yep. And all the
already divisions,
the
in
myth
film.
structures of
Exactly.
telling
It's-
you what reality is.
It's now just accelerating, putting it all to task. Much like what we see around us right now, all the different mythologies are being put again to task, again and again and again, over and over and over, and that's the story that never fucking ends.
to task.
Blech.
Interesting. Yep. Well, that's been quite a session so far,
Gated.
I would say.
We've defined the scam.
So much discussed.
Blech.
No, it's this is part 2 already. Part 1, half of what we did, we were both surprised at how much focus that we had to get through like these topics, and they're kind of endless in a way too. But we've really, as far as content and development, blown this meeting out of the park already. We're not even done yet, but it's already like 1.5
Mm-hmm.
full meetings of like content, right?
Well,
you know.
Look, I keep gravitating towards the mechanical discussions because they tend to really help when you're dropping into the concrete things. All of the mechanisms now can like assemble into like, okay, so this is that, this is this, this is this, this is that. So that's why I keep trying to hammer on the complex adaptive grammatical stacking, like the entire resonance wake
Giving
stuff,
a map.
Giving
You have to provide a map.
the quenching of its abundance at the top layer through commodification into one
Yep.
single mechanism. That's
Right,
another
scarcity, artificial scarcity. Like that's another huge one.
Um,
Like that'll make it right into the book. That'll be a chapter title.
The-
I'm almost certain.
the resultant ego stacking, simply because
We didn't get into pseudo-gender too much.
pseudo-gender.
We almost kind of did.
Pseudo-gender.
Like the patriarchy and what everybody talks about.
So pseudo-gender is a discussion that helps you understand how 2 layers of ego manifest as one, and it's is an external interaction with the system that feeds the cycle, and so within each square you can kind of see how it holds
And
on to
the
its
stacking-
own position,
stacking the
and so it
pyramids.
allows another square to sit
Right.
above it and crush
Mhm.
it a little bit. So
Right.
there's that.
The kind of household as market input-output machine.
Yeah, so there's some discussion to be had about like
The family
more,
as
the
input-output machine.
The flame, the flame ego part is like how it
But also
constantly
corporation.
disintegrates. Oh yeah. Oh, every stack of ego is whatever you find in institution, corporation, whatever. It's
Right.
person. It's all
Everybody's
stacks.
reporting to somebody else who's reporting to somebody else.
You report to your conscience. What is that? that conscience thing. That's the pseudo father.
No.
That's the pseudo father. The
All
fucking
right. Should I do this? I shouldn't have done that.
the fragile little fucking thing that sits there telling you you're so bad.
Santa Claus. He's making a list.
And
He's
the
checking it twice.
pseudo mother is that you're feeling of responsibility, but to the wrong fucking thing, which is this fucking screamer in your head.
Yeah, interesting. Well, lots of trauma to unpack there. For society and people at large, lots to do.
So pseudo-gender is mostly about how stacks are binding to the layering, like the layering binding mechanism.
Right. That's what I got from that discussion.
The ego flame thing is more about the disintegration that it always...
How it all just forces itself to fall into a cauldron of fire.
So no, the whole thing is sustained by the flame itself. It has to be war and flame is the whole fuel behind it.
I see. That's another way to look at
and
it.
And then as a consequence of that, the whole stack is forever disintegrating, going towards the bottom. Right. And the only way to escape the flame is to climb to the top.
That's kind of the top-down view of it. How to appropriate that structure.
And all of that is undermined entirely by the pumpkin diagram, where everything's just flattened out, and you just can't play those stupid games to win those stupid prizes to begin with.
Right, and this is all dependent on a model, Hellenic model, which is vastly open, radically open model of interaction.
I think it's important for you to know the
artificial
nature.
Scarcity. This is the conversation of artificial scarcity once again.
It's important for you to know
which
this.
Is awesome, amazing.
It's important to know how these stacks are meant to be looked at, because
this was one chart that I thought
this is how this all plugs back into our previous discussion of commodification itself. Because this diagram discusses this diagram right here discusses the actual upload process of commodification that I was referring to in the whole concept of production pipeline. So this is how the whole mechanism is hooked into once it has been emerged.
Yeah,
that's like the perpetual hooking back into the underlying stacks.
And I like how we have the reward punishment at the top there,
yeah, it only ever touches the ego. And the ego is the thing that that becomes the entity that siphons the actual complexities of the stacks below it without subjecting the market forces to it, allowing it to float just a little longer. The problem with all of that is that all of that does is it keeps the commodity upload mechanism up and running.
Tripping out. Social neural. Just giving a view, so it could be reconstructed out of this video.
Well, all of these are available as images anyway, so
yeah, of course.
Anybody wants that,
The
they can have it.
Portal Mountain Imager gallery.
The point of this diagram is to actually show the connection between the polymorphic machine as it is, with the hijacked element of the market machine sitting on top of it, sort of crushing any and all reification that is necessary to the layers below the ego. It just dishes out rewards and punishments to the ecosystem, and then forgets the rest.
And this, I know it's kind of a long shot, but it
uses ego as a shield.
I wanted to use this kind of a discussion for looking at cancel culture and how to cancel somebody.
That is the same thing.
I know.
It's the same process right there. It's the ego shield making it impossible to go beyond a certain layer.
Right.
The chunkification that doesn't allow you to know what you
chunkify. So basically the majority of reality is cancelled. There's we're fighting over the scraps of the what's left should be cancelled or
because not. This is almost an autonomous system at this point.
So this
is autonomous
mechanism.
It doesn't need to actually refer to anything else.
Is that number 4 for today's revelations?
Well, cancel culture would basically be is language pushes out the living. So words on paper erase the
Is that
body.
the essence of? Isn't there a social justice to cancel culture?
It's another manifestation
Isn't it justice being served?
It's another manifestation of the productive culture. What are you producing? Or you're not producing the right morals. So, the Industrial Revolution deals with
Right.
objectivism. This one deals with solipsism. You're not producing the right set of
Which one?
moral
Informational.
bindings.
The informational revolution.
Right. The pendulum is swung from the order to the chaotic, from the masculine to the feminine now, and
Tipikoru.
but this is all built on top of each other, and it's all opposite, right? So it's the same
Right.
rhetoric in the opposite direction.
The same thing fueling. It's like how people can just en masse snap against hating one country or hating another person
So-
or another dictator or thinking about this
So-
political mass narratives, right? You can
So-
just
so-
swap and switch from
yeah,
one
so-
to another like a machine.
So whether it's like how you ritualistically behave or whether it's how you ritualistically think, and it goes from one to the other extreme over and over
The crazy
and over
part
again.
is like for me, mass narratives hooking into that mass media, right? Like being able to
Cancel-
broadcast and know that you're hitting millions of people.
I associate cancel culture phenomenon type stuff with lynching, with witch hunts, with
So isn't this against the body? I will not talk to you. I'm just going to eliminate you. Right? We
It's
will
a
not
reli-
have
it's
a
a-
negotiation.
it's an ex-
You are going to be eliminated. Isn't that like
it's a
disconnection of the mind
it's
from
an
the body?
it's an extremely religious war.
Right? How
it's
can
a-
the mind kill the body like that?
Here's how you know it's a religious war. When Protestants and Catholics fought
This is
each
just the
hold on,
problem.
hold on, hold on.
It's just the problem,
I'm just
though.
I'm just going to give you
It's a religious war,
some
okay.
historical manifestations.
Okay, yep.
When Christians
Context,
when
nice.
Christians fought non-Christians in medieval times in general,
Hmm.
not medieval times, gunpowder was already invented and stuff like that. They tended to use rounded bullets, like or muskets and all of that stuff. But then there was a period of time when Protestants and Catholics had at each other. Do you know what they used? Cubes. Because it would shred the shit out of you when this goes through your body.
Yeah. You
So-
don't have not a lot accuracy at range,
The
but
viciousness
Correct.
at which you get
why do you have hollow?
fucking
Why do you have
removed.
hollow points?
No, but if you're
That's
on,
the
but right
classic
now,
hollow point.
But right now, if
there.
you're on the extreme left of the opinion spectrum, right now, if you're on the extreme left, and you tote the wrong line once,
You're gone. You thought wrong.
you fucking Nazi.
You're
Do you
on the
remember
other
that?
side now.
Do you remember that? Right.
Oh, I know about that.
So
yeah.
it's the same fucking response. It's the more you're even more vilified, right?
Just
Than
for
if
even-
if you had been on the on
For
the,
even
on that
creating that calculation where you said the thing that looked like it was aligned
How
with
dare
this
you
side.
to have done that within our group, you traitor?
Yeah.
Right? Like the response to you was even more vicious because it was as if you were a traitor in the midst.
It's almost the 1 year anniversary since I've been banned from SOTS.
Somehow you got me banned by from that other fucking thing, and I didn't even say shit.
From well,
You
at
instigated
least
it.
I
but-
invited you to Wizard Memes. I don't know who is Anders or Geiger. One of them might be
Geiger
the
removed me for sure.
one of them might be the admin, but
Yes.
yeah, we were just commenting on the content of a joke meme that was posted, right? It was like direct commentary, and no discussion. So this is the fuck of it. Why don't you fucking discuss something? Why don't you talk about it? All you do is give the reward punishment, and you don't fucking listen because you're not interested in that communication relationship between the bottom and the top, if you will, right?
Well, no, this is how this is how you disguise. This is how you disguise the fact that you're not interested in it with a thin veil of.
Yeah.
I would be interested
By-
in it. I would be
Except
interested in it.
except you broke
if
the law,
not-
and
if
now
it
you're
wasn't-
punished and you're gone.
I would be interested in having this discussion as long as the other person is not who I make you out to be. Because let's face it.
Right.
Let's face it. You have interactions through screen. Right? So the only version of you that exists in this person's head is whatever they've made up.
to the extent of that they could.
That's what
There
it
is
is.
no
Yep.
there's no further there's no further communication about that. Any
Oh,
of
actually,
those
we
facts.
patched things up though. Like we're cool now. Me and G-Man. Yeah, we're cool. That's all it passed. It's all like just drama and stuff, right?
How we patched it up? He
No, I just said like I'd rather if we didn't like just do the like antagonistic shit against each other, and he was like, yeah, okay. And then that was the last I heard, so we could be that status.
Well,
Just so
I
you
would
know.
be happy to actually see that through.
Well, yeah, fuck, I don't know.
Because I'm not interested.
I'm
Like,
cool with that.
Like,
I just wanted to throw that out there because
my frustration is that like I'm always plugging through shit, and I hate being derailed by irrelevant
it basically
bullshit.
it won't or doesn't change anything. Everybody just keeps being themselves, except now we're not having a fight. Right? That's all that it is.
Fucking
That's all that it
if
is.
that's the case, I'm fucking so for it.
I think he's cool, man. I think he can get it, and I think he did. And I think we did.
I know that there's a decent person underneath all of that bullshit somewhere.
I think we did have an understanding. That's what I got from it. So I'm still there. Peace, Geiger. My man. Soundtrack going on. Some kind of thought pattern. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. It's great. It's cool to kind of reconcile with people. Nobody wants to fight, anyways. Who cares? Whatever. That's my position right now. So
At the end of the day, I think the fight's about the wrong problem.
well, and also like to some extent, I enjoyed fight and combat and all that kind of stuff. But if you're coming from like in a dojo, everybody's kind of on the same team. We're all training how to how to fight, right? There's not the animosity of like you're literally my enemy. That shouldn't be there. But fight is in competition, whatever, social environments.
I've actually, you know what? It was more of a tongue-in-cheek thought to me a couple of days ago. But I was thinking about the whole left-right divide and how people keep fighting over, like, are you on the left, are you on the right, are you? So I decided that there should be another spectrum called the above and below.
Direction brains.
No, just go above and below.
left, right, above, and below.
So I'm not left and right. I'm just left or right. I'm just above and below.
Nobody will get that though,
That's-
because their direction brain only contemplates a left or a right. You're either one or the other. Their brain is wired for directions.
You don't think I'm doing this tongue in cheek at all?
Yeah. No, me too. Me too.
None of it is striking you as a little bit me.
Me too. Yep. Oh, glorious.
Yeah, so this diagram right there is a great unifier between once the production pipeline is happening, how it hijacks the entire stacking mechanism to do its dirty bidding. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the point. Whoa.
You can almost see it.
It's okay. The actual image is available elsewhere, so it's not.
Yeah.
Thing. So
True.
here's another little tidbit that might not be.
By the way,
very
we got
obvious.
about half an hour.
Cool,
Just
cool.
saying.
Cool.
On this recording.
If you notice, between egos, there is a relationship called competition.
Mhm.
So the point that I wanted to bring up about that is that competition only ever occurs at that level, of that artificial level of scarcity at the
Right.
at the
And you can have rivalry in let's say, tribal setting and sports, and people can play games still, and like who's the better hunter, who gets more, but it's not.
I have a more
uh,
fundamental thought about that though. For example,
Just trying to evoke a scene. Let's
yeah,
riff on it.
so-
Riff
so
on that.
I
That tribal scene.
I want to evoke a different scene where nature will sometimes be described as males competing for females over mating rights. And my thinking pattern is this: I don't think they're competing to have mates. I don't think they understand conceptually the whole narrative of I'm going to
I
win
do
this battle
and then I
I'm
get
going,
this.
I don't think that happens whatsoever. I think there is a primal instincts that
Well,
instigate aggression and need for
There is obviously
battles.
like the social reward that comes from even a mother appreciating what a kid does. When the kid does the dishes, the
But
mother
here's another
appreciates
interpretation.
it, and you feel good as a kid, and you just want to do things good for your social and with the
But
world,
here's another
the environment
interpretation.
around you.
Here's another interpretation. It's a dance. It's a brutal, painful, bloody dance.
Oh man,
But
That's
it's not
what
a.
it is.
But it is tango. It is a. It is a unified sort of motion. It's not. It's not a It's not the kind of competition in which you have an abstract goal to reach, and obtain through going through the trials. The world is not competitive. Competition arises in the form of ego.
That's to define competition a certain way. But there's also like the idea of survival of the fittest and all that. Right? We're not saying that doesn't exist.
We're not saying it doesn't exist, but I don't think competition is the word that qualifies the process by which the fittest survive. The fittest survive by keeping up,
Right.
by keeping to step with the dance.
Competition implies fiat, judgment, and qualification.
Whereas in a dance, you can either dance with the flow or not, and fail in that sense, right? So, that is to say, essentially, that competition is a myth, and only arrives at a point in time where you have commodification and production pipeline.
Right. And yeah, and it's bound into this kind of scarcity, artificial scarcity idea too. Competition. Oh, all your effort only matters if you're first place.
And so you see what is happening is that instead of recognizing the error in here, everything else got redefined in terms of this ego stacking and as a competition. So now nature competes with itself somehow. Right? And they see all these walruses fighting over the female as if they have this idea inside their head of like, I'm gonna get laid. I'm gonna get laid. Laid! No.
Well, so to me, this discussion points out the complexities that kind of demand or require that we need to be pulling back the mythological scenario back to the tribe. The breakaway, like the feast economy, like at the point of or where the elders could no longer contain the fucking crack cocaine of having that commodity that everybody wants. Everybody wants, and they'll do anything to get it. And you have freaking abundance of it.
And also
it's literal social cocaine.
And also
you are the dealer of the tribal.
And also
world.
the pain point of having to unravel the commodification plateaus from the concept of progression from the animism that preceded everything as being like not a return to some kind of primitivity specifically, but rather recognizing that the original view had more to offer than the supplanted view after the fact with the plateaus.
Not even the view itself, just the where the artifacts of the time led you to, where it brought you.
What do you mean there?
Just you can't say this view is better than that view, but what you have available to you as far as culture and being taught and trained, the artifacts available to you kind of lift you up into different ways. One with the loop, and with life, the tree of life, and one the market machine, the collector lane off the grand lane of the highway.
So, I'll try to qualify the way I think about better view. That there's a particular thematic component to it that has to be there regardless of what kind of view it is. So, whether the original animism, whatever that would be, right, where it's not objectified yet, or after the fact, whatever,
a symbolic pointer to something in history.
After the fact, what rose with Buddhism, which is extremely colorful and fucking religious sort of scenery, all the way to our iteration of it that removes everything in favor of mechanics and stuff like that.
Yeah. We're very professional.
So, but each iteration retains one specific thematic element in that everything is alive in some sense. Everything is connected in some sense. Everything is more conscious than not conscious in some sense. Whatever those words may be. And ultimately, in our discussion of consciousness, we're discussing the resonance wakes and the particular the isomorphism that is found within. So in each case, it's the same picture told in a completely different set of words, right? And all of these are valid. No exception. Those are all valid ways to look at it.
That was beautiful, man.
So when I was saying view, I'm not discussing a particular ontological matrix in its articulation. I'm discussing the connotations of that matrix. So this one, and this one share the exact same connotations, same principled understandings.
It's like there's two modes of interpretation of what you would expect from an interpreter to understand what's being
what's
conveyed.
Beautiful about this is that one is pre-civilization, marred in descriptions of nature alone. The second one is entirely solipsistic bullshit civilization.
That's harsh, man.
Marred in imagination alone. And now it's a scientific
supposedly
exposition that is marred by structural limitations, logic, and the like.
And corruption.
Well, no, I'm talking about logic.
Yeah, that's where my mind was going.
Corruption stems from the Gödel's theorem of
Like
incompleteness.
trust the science corruption, I mean.
That's mixing it up with superficiality.
The sorcery, usury, using of the idea of science.
No, you're mixing what I'm talking about with a superficial gradient on top of it. The
I know,
superficial,
I'm just saying that's where my mind went from having heard your fundamentals.
Yeah.
I'm with you, bro.
So from having like a more spiritual understanding to awakened understanding to what would you call it? If we weren't to use this flowery terminology, it would be more like qualified terminology.
Qualification is nice. Quantity, quanta.
A discussion,
Qualia.
a discussion with regard purely to the concept of qualia and its relationship back to quanta, and by
Qualia quanta.
and by extension, its relationship to the scientific worldview as it is held by the secular mindset, if you will.
Very nice. Qualia quanta. Got to bring that up too. That's number 5 of significant notables.
Qualia quanta is
Of
word
this,
is
meeting.
word number. It's that
Right.
dichotomy. Word number is the process of commodification. Commodification and production pipeline is the process of scarcity. Scarcity is the and it results in the loop because you remove all of the tangible connections back to the stack, which is described in this diagram here.
Everything gets subservient to the loop, the
With
production pipeline itself. The pipeline, capital sucks capital in.
We'll look at the feedback.
Capital sucks commodities into its capital tornado.
The market machine is stuck in this feedback loop so much so it's a tight loop right here, but the ego drains everything. Right?
Dun dun dun.
The market machine is just utilizing ego and just refers to it. It doesn't care about anything below, but the ego siphons every resource it can master to accommodate this.
Oh man.
And it is this process that causes the vacancy that we're referring to in the self-reference that has the
Artificial
neglect
scarcity.
that has the neglect component built into it, and that neglectful self-reference is the soul in need of rescue.
Mm-hmm.
The need of rescue is a quality. Again, it's not a quantified statement.
Need of saving, you mean?
Right. There is not. It's not like somebody's going to come in and actually do something and then you're saved.
Insert preferred word.
The only way to make that a reality is to sell you that story.
Make
Trinket.
Make a reality.
Trinket.
A bubble. A reality bubble. With agent bubbles.
Actually, the questions about reality and ethics should be thought of as bubbles. Correct.
Right. Well,
Correct. Boom.
As I was talking about earlier, the idea of a reality tunnel, a tunnel seems like more of a permanent thing, but a bubble, as in a rolling boil, to describe consciousness, is bubbles forming up and just popping, but all over, and they just keep forming up and popping.
We did not come up with this imagery. Thank you, Buddhists.
Once again, tip of the hat. Yep, no doubt. Well, should we recap here? I don't know. I think we've outdone
Let's just
ourselves.
shoot the shit at this point.
Yeah,
Meh.
we've done 2 meetings in one by now. We'll say that.
Yeah.
Definitely. I feel it. Feel a little, exhausted, but also appreciative.
So I think one last thing I need to mention is recap on the particular stacking from the neural arrest perspective. And the reason being is that we want to bridge the gap from narrative
Right.
to how it appears in the moment. So we've like assembled this grand old narratives that comes back into this pre-assembled piece back from the APS to us of what the object is delineated by. How do we take that back through the entire system and cycle it through another process of thought? How does it reappear there? And the answer to that is, of course, the meme. Well, by of course I mean in our modeling schema.
Of course.
The brain diagram is actually more representative of that, but in our case, this should suffice in terms of showing the layers.
Which we probably have.
We do. This just shows how it goes through the mimetic layer, through the abstract and concrete lenses to.
Yeah. So we were talking earlier.
To reiterate.
Do we need to bring this up? And I think to some extent, like, it's great. Like the holonic model, right? It has to be brought up. This HGMA thing, at least. We don't need to talk about the whole neural operating system and like.
I don't know how HGMA is going to actually add anything to this description right now.
The book itself, though, requires. That's what I'm saying.
It can be implicitly assumed in the descriptors.
Because this is like archetypal of the model that we keep referring to, HGMA, right?
I don't
So that
disagree.
has to be there somewhere.
I don't disagree, but we haven't mentioned anything.
Yeah, I don't know where it fits exactly.
That's what I'm saying. There's nothing to refer back to in terms of everything else we've said. This
Right. We'll have to figure that one out.
That delineation really comes up in mimetic, the standard mimetic model itself. It describes where it comes from.
Right, but where in this book so far do we have that discussion?
We're not referencing that explicitly anywhere.
The closest was about between the dream and the moment, and the switching between them evokes this model.
Well, the neural operating system is a discussion of the standard model. So
Right?
somewhere in there.
I think so. just wanted to note this question about HGMA is central to the book itself. Where does this appear?
Well-
Because imagine, what is the title? We have the very symbol of Portal Mountain as a triangle with HGMA.
So this is introductory material, correct?
It has to be here in some form. That's all I'm saying.
No, sure. I'm just saying this. It's implicit already in the text because the model that is being used is inherently built on it.
My question is, where does this fit in the book? Where do
I
we
don't think it's-
describe this?
I don't think it explicit.
You're saying it doesn't.
No,
but-
not explicitly. And the reason it won't explicitly fit into this book because you're not trying to tell a participant or a member what the deal is. You're trying to get a guest to participate. That is not a question.
Book one, right?
They're not going to ask that question. It's too abstract. It doesn't deal with anything immediate. They might catch on to it.
So I'm just kind of wondering if people who already are, let's say, of membership, are able to recognize such a chapter or whatever, to say, like to a chapter to that. I don't know. Maybe if we don't need it, then fine. But to me it seemed like pretty sweet, right? Like the HGMA, shared concrete abstract. You get to introduce like the concept of the horizon.
Okay.
Like all that shit. The shifting of the cognitive alignment window, and like describing kind of academically the very mechanics of how this scarcity, artificial scarcity,
So the only place
happens.
So the only place I can think of where it would actually fit like that
the core fundamental mechanisms that
is
allow
in
it
the-
to be.
is in the neural OS portion, where you're describing layers of the neural OS, stemming from.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm saying. Like, we
stemming
need
from
like
this
at
thing.
least an intro. In the book.
Because
Like, I don't want to sit here like writing a book and
Like, if-
sound like somebody who can't back my shit up, right?
at some point, it has to be understood that there's this cycle going on somehow, because what we're trying to say is that
The memeplex cycle.
all of this object stuff feeds back into signal stuff, right? Which reemerges back out as meme. Haven't been reintegrated through the moment over here.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you got more memetics and a new fucking thing going on and a new moment. So this cycle needs to be somewhat understood, and as the cycle is happening, you also need to kind of basically grasp the fact that it's coming this way every time,
Right.
right? And you
Good connection.
and you believe effectively that you're here, meanwhile everything is happening here. And this is all dead stuff that just is a dead AI, if you will, that just like does machine learning on as it goes. And this
Right,
machine
right.
learning is fed through the memeplex itself too. So the memeplex is where the moment happens, the integrative part. The dream is what these things give back to you, and those objects feed back through a completed narrative, back through artifacts and appearances, memes.
Of course.
So on and on and on the cycle goes, and from this sort of picture, you can start to say that archetypical stuff happens here, modeling happens here, and gilding happens here, and the collective result in a different language is right there, somehow. I don't know how the conversation looks like, but that's
beyond a
where.
horizon. For one reason, it's beyond a horizon is because it's involving other neural units. Other neural units.
So the original discussion regarding the archetype, the model, and the guild,
And not only your own emergent
stems-
internal language of what you experience.
the
is
original
beyond
the
that.
original discussion in the memetics standard model about archetype, model, and guild is deduced from these layers.
Mm-hmm.
So that chapter can, so if you go through all of that informative stuff and establish those layers, this is where you can extrapolate that model.
So we can point to this in the book and say for further reading, but I think that this somehow has to come up somewhere in the book.
Well,
I just don't know where.
I'm telling you, it needs to come up with.
Is this the addendum like we were talking about? Like this doesn't fit into the narrative of the book, but here's an extra thing that some people are interested in.
Wasn't the model part of the index? The neural model? Or is it part of the book?
Neural model?
The neural OS model layers, the stack.
Well, we kind of decided that that's too complicated to get into.
So in index 1, index 2. If you need it to be in there. So, on top of what you've just read, da-da-da-da-da-da, and then, so, on top of what you just read plus that, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
So you're talking about sectioning off meta, the book, into more and more complex sort of issue, more fundamental.
Brief expositions of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Could save a lot of time and just structure it like that without tiptoeing and dancing around and explaining what's happening. Just explicitly meta.
And then once we have it down, we could rearrange. Right? Once we have something down.
Yep. I think we've got a ton of material.
So you sharing your drink? I liked it.
From last 2 weeks ago. Of course, buddy.
I thought this is how it goes now.
Especial. It's a tasty treat.
Cheers.
Cheers indeed. To another successful, well, we haven't packed 2 dev meetings into one, but this time we definitely did, content-wise. And we are at, let's say, 10 minutes left in this, so
I think
just, detach from what we were doing
I'm
too
happy.
much.
I'm happy.
Final thoughts.
Final thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm fucking ecstatic about looking at this diagram again and seeing the disconnect the market machine has through the ego with the rest of the stacking mechanism.
Right.
That gives us a nice. It's an older picture, but it's a clearer picture about what how the death cycle remains hovering above
Right.
without needing to come back.
And so the interesting point to me here is that the natural holarchy stack has a place in this model in which it's saying, okay, what's actually happening to the context? Context question mark. Holarchy stack.
Yeah, so it's always in behind the scenes.
Reintroducing the body, bringing the body back
But
into
with the market
mind.
machine dictating reward and punishment systems from above the way it does, it doesn't necessarily have to take care of any of the inputs that that are produced by these by that stack. That's the kicker. The second to that is the description of commodification as the taking away the context with the replacement and substituting, taking away something from the context and plugging it into the production pipeline, which is a manifestation of the currency / pipeline mechanism that is emergent from.
Pipeline implies capital, implies flows,
But
implies input output.
But the connection,
machine.
but its emergence from
This is market machine.
The
This
trade
pipeline.
its emergence from the primordial trade economy, with the
Right.
application of
Right.
feast economy to bootstrap the entire process. That
Interesting.
with that bootstrap being
Beginning
in
point, I see
place,
what you're
a
pointing at.
pipeline was set up, and now that pipeline had could stand to be fed more and more different
Origins.
types of commodities.
And before you know it, you are leading a power. Like you as a leader, tribe leader, somebody like a great warrior in your tribe or whatever, but that's doing this kind of stuff, or a great...
Imagine being a great big warrior and
Jeez,
being commodified into the production pipeline as a soldier. being a shaman and commodified into the production pipeline as a priest. Goods, services, replacement of presence with representation. The replacement of a presence of something with its representative commodified variation.
This is a
accessible through
classic
currency.
Classic form of the problem. Once again,
So,
it always comes back to the problem.
Feast economy plus trade economy, bootstrap, production pipeline, and currency, siphoning out every existing natural thing,
Yep.
making it into a commodified thing.
That's really interesting.
creating
Everything to the
artificial-
service of the pipeline itself.
Artificial
Capital
scarcity,
sucking in more capital as a tornado of
artificial
commodities.
scarcity, ego grows, the barrier between the market machine
It's
and
very
the natural
interesting.
stack grows and becomes impenetrable. The ego becomes impenetrable.
Especially
The stacks grow.
with
The fire
with the layering and layering of
grows.
commodification.
War spreads.
The ego can't step off of its roots or it'll die, right? With the stacking and stacking of commodification.
Hence, any challenge to it is
you
met.
can't go off of that path
Any challenge to it is met with the quality of pain,
and fierce opposition.
from inside to the outside. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yep, and I want this to be a part of the book, the whole story of chronology, at least an
And this-
introduction of it
And this particular diagram,
in this context
points-
of this market.
Look at how fragile the ego is, though. Here, you have such a nice support cushion. Like this could just like lay back into it and just pop back up. This thing shatters. It has nothing. It's crushed.
The ego.
At this point in the ego, it's so disconnected from everything. It's just got this little tiny relationship. Anything happens to it, it's gone. The natural hierarchy constantly has this cushioning back,
No,
and
that's
forth and
that's
back
right.
and
That's
forth.
right.
You can't see it on the picture, but the visual here is that there is a kind of a visual indication of how the natural hierarchy can kind of sort of rest upon its social OS and sort of bounce back. It's like almost like a spring-like cushion, whereas up here you have a kind of like a really rigid system in which any break to the foundation or anything tipping it from the top, and this thing is just like taken out of the picture without any recourse.
It's interesting to juxtapose the different ways of being.
So the ego is in fear, whereas without ego, there's like no condition for that fear.
Right. Well, you keep getting continuously bootstrapped into life and existence, no matter what you do, almost. Especially if you focus.
Well, right,
But that just keeps pushing you up.
The cushion is, notice the cushion is not the neural OS; it's the social OS. So it's leaning back against the tribe and having them move you forward. Whenever there's a
Yeah, which is great. That's nice, isn't it? That's nice.
well,
That's
it
nice.
seems like it should be the way it goes.
And so within our Portal Mountain, what do you call it? You know, little like guilds.
Portal Mountain being just a brand.
Yeah, just moving forward in like, just thinking about this chart here, right? So talking about self, social, Portal Mountain.
So, to combine these ideas, you can look at it this way. With the self, what we're doing is we're moving from the ego disposition to the natural hierarchy disposition.
Right.
Itself.
Refocusing on what's important, if you will.
Bypassing the fact that you're a neural unit to
So
begin with.
that
as an
ego
entity.
is an artificial layer that presumes to supplant the entire thing
So yeah, by
with
refocusing.
itself.
So the first thing we're trying to do is refocusing attention, the central focal point of activities, if you will, of the self from being trapped within the ego into being sort of a member of the
natural holarchy stack. Yeah, there you go. Natural holarchy stack. We have so many-
Holarchy. We just shortened it to
hetero
holarchy.
holarchy, whatever.
We
have
actually
a few
killed
names.
that. We killed that term.
Yeah,
It's just holarchy now. Nobody gives a shit. Everybody knows what we're talking about.
and there's an extension in doing so, because when any individual does that and recognizes any other individual who does that, there's a natural tendency to recognize one another, and this is how we move into the social element on here. And
Right, it's
and
an
move into-
invocation of the self-reference and the context. In other words, we're all people in proximity with each other. So why
Mhm.
should we allow that our bank account is turned off, that we have so much supply and so much demand, and yet there is zero economy?
Yeah, and
Explain
then,
that.
And then the next phase of that is the Portal Mountain, which is basically a linguistic phase in which, after the fact of the recognition, is to introduce a language to be able to navigate things in terms of finding oneself in this context versus the ego that preceded that.
Mhm.
And so that's
Right.
the importance
so
of that
the
language.
guild organizational dynamics
Right.
is enabled by that
so,
language.
So without the language, there's the language is what moves.
A model. Remember
The-
we were
the-
talking about
the
the,
lang- the lang-
meta language too?
The language is what creates the opening for the ego to recognize a non-egoic sort of alternative, and be able to recognize the same thing in another ego, or another variation of ego itself. And so while it's kind of like fake it till you make it sort of deal,
We're actually
there's
at
enough
a couple minutes.
there's enough there's enough of an ability to communicate about the fact that there is something below there that we're both trying to negotiate. And so it's a way to for ego itself to relay to ego their information about non-egoic participation.
Right, and that's what we've been talking about. That's critical. That's introducing the fundamental guild to the guilds. And with that, I think, yep, we've got a minute left. Do you have any final last say? I appreciate completely everybody, and you, my dude, for good convos. And I think we slammed this out of the park because we actually advanced ourselves by one whole meeting, because there was 2 meetings in this meeting. Because the amount of terrain, the raw terrain that we covered,
I
just
think
insane.
I think at
Insane.
some point we need to maybe cover modeling the ontological matrix itself, the consequence of death circles and what they present as ontological matrix.
Modeling better.
So
But we've outlined it already, though. I think.
So if unless we have, yeah. So the idea there being the
Details are another
the
thing.
description of the scarce desert of the real, as you will, the Morpheus quote, the desert
Of what's being reified, the desert of the reified.
like what after all of these stages have gone, and we've plugged everything into the pipeline, the desert that appears. Just a descriptor of that of some sort.
My dude, literally, I can't even go into this next minute, so I got to stop the recording here.
Cheers.
It's been awesome. Appreciate.
Love you, people.
Love you all.